everybody, a very good morning. It's 7 o'clock. Coming up on today's programme, a landmark report finds that victims of antisocial behaviour say their fears are ignored.
Yes, I've spent 6 months investigating antisocial behaviour, spending time with a community that feels like nobody listens.
And our protest putting off tourists. We'll hear from a former Met detective.
Yes, we will. It's Monday, the 9th of September.
Hello, I've just phoned and asked for fire brigades and police. We've just realised that whatever's on fire looks like a motorbike.
Lives blighted by antisocial behaviour, but 2/3 of complaints are ignored or unresolved. Also ahead, Sky News uncovers evidence of an ethnically motivated massacre in Sudan. Great Ormond Street Hospital launches an urgent review into a former surgeon involving the treatment of more than 700 children. Plus, pressure on the Prime Minister over plans to cut the winter fuel allowance for 10 million pensioners. We'll speak to the government very soon. Paris says farewell to the Paralympics and a glorious summer of sport with a spectacular fireworks display. Morning, everybody. Thousands of victims of antisocial behaviour say they're being let down and left living in fear. Sky News has had first sight of a landmark report from England and Wales Victims Commissioner, which reveals that more than 2/3 of people who have reported antisocial behaviour haven't had their complaints resolved. We'll get more from Nick in just a moment, but first, here's his report.
Oh my God. Yeah, I've just phoned the police and the fire brigade.
So a gang of boys dumped a bike?
It's a gang of boys have dumped a bike. They've created a fire.
This is the terrifying moment a motorbike is set on fire just yards from a family's back garden.
My house backs onto the Wilmot Park and it's been set alight in front of the gates and there's black smoke billowing in the air.
This is one of a million reported cases of antisocial behaviour each year, blighting communities across Britain. Paul filmed that incident. He says he's been reporting antisocial behaviour for years and thinks very little has been done to help him and his neighbours.
I've been trying since we moved in here in 2016 to try and get the council to pay attention to this. It massively gives us huge amounts of anxiety and stress, lack of sleep.
Now a major new report into antisocial behaviour reveals that thousands of victims like Paul aren't getting enough help. The Victims Commissioner for England and Wales found that 2/3 of people who reported antisocial behaviour said their problems hadn't been resolved. Half said the problems had been ongoing for 5 years or more. The majority, more than 60%, reported it to multiple agencies like police, councils and housing associations. And a staggering 70% said they received no support at all. Labour says tackling antisocial behaviour is one of its key priorities. Dame Diana Johnson is the new policing minister.
What are you going to do to try and clear up when someone rings up and something's happening in their street? The fobbing off of it's a council thing, it's a police thing. That is a government thing. That is going to be something that you have to figure out.
Absolutely, and I recognise that.
What are you going to do?
I recognise that as a constituency MP because I've had constituents say to me, I've rung the council or I've rung the police, nobody comes, nothing's done. So I think it is about recognising we need to get much better at this joined-up approach to dealing with what's going on in communities and tackling the individuals who are causing the problems to families.
Kent Police told us that they are aware of local concerns and is working with Dartford Council to address these issues. They said they attended within hours of the motorbike incident but haven't caught those responsible, adding, "We have teams who regularly patrol the area and also have a dedicated beat officer who residents can talk to directly." Dartford Council said they had stepped up patrols here, urging residents to report incidents to police.
It obviously makes you want to move. It doesn't make you want to live here anymore.
So it's one of the government's top 6 priorities. What are they doing about it?
Well, the government say that it's a priority for them, that they want to bring in what's called respect orders. Now, if that sounds familiar, Kay, you'll remember back in sort of 25 plus years ago, the Blair government brought in antisocial behaviour orders. ASBOs. They became pretty infamous, but they weren't very effective. And the government now want to say they're bringing in respect orders, but the detail's not quite clear about how they'll work. There's also an issue about neighbourhood policing. We know that there aren't enough police officers. People feel vulnerable. And often, as is shown through Baroness Newlove's report this morning, which we have exclusively, people are falling between the gaps of whether this is a police matter or whether it's a council matter. And by and large, police are being expected to be their own detectives, filming these things, logging things until they have enough evidence for the police or council to act. And what this report shows, and we spent 6 months in this street talking to these residents, is that really pretty much no matter what happens in your street, it's still very difficult to get help. A motorbike set on fire in the middle of the night with children in bed at the end of a garden, that has not been investigated by the police. They've been unable to find those responsible. And I think it lays bare actually a huge problem. 1 million reported cases every year, and yet 70% of people asked feel that it's not being resolved. So this is going to be a big thing for the government to get a grip on. They say it's a priority, but I'm afraid, having spoken to the Minister this week, the detail on what that actually looks like is actually quite thin.
Well, let's try her again later on for now. Thanks so much. Thank you. You can see the extended version of Nick's report, Fault Lines, Living in Fear, coming up later on in the programme. As you can see, it was at 6:30 this morning. You can see it at 10:30, 12:30, 2:30, 6:30 and 8 o'clock, and any time online. Great Ormond Street Hospital is urgently reviewing more than 700 cases involving children who were all seen by one of its former orthopaedic surgeons. Some are said to have suffered life-changing injuries as a result of unnecessary or inappropriate procedures. Let's get more, should we? Daniel standing by for us at Great Ormond Street. Hi, tell us more, Daniel. Morning.
Morning, Kay. Well, yeah, an awful set of circumstances here being laid out by this review, and this review's only just started and it's going to continue, and they've already identified 22 children who they say have come to harm as a result of work being done by Dr. Yasir Jabbar, who served at Great Ormond Street between 2017 and 2023. They have identified a number of incidences in which it is inappropriate, unsuitable, unnecessary operations conducted by this particular doctor, and they've found out that they're going to have to investigate what it is that this man has been doing while he's been working at Great Ormond Street Hospital. Now, we haven't actually heard anything from Mr. Jabbar, but one thing we do know about him is that he's now practicing in Dubai. Great Ormond Street, for their part, they say that they have contacted all the parents and families who have been impacted where harm has been identified and discussed their cases with them under their duty of candour, and they wish to convey their apologies to parents and families who are affected. But this review, which is being conducted by Great Ormond Street Hospital and the Royal College of Surgeons, is very, very serious indeed. It's a process which is expected to last around 18 months, but clearly the impact of some of these treatments that were being done by Dr. Yasir Jabbar, well, the impact of those could last a lifetime for some of these children.
OK, Daniel, thank you. Let's find out what's happening as far as the rest of the news is concerned now. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Yes, let's talk about the COVID pandemic, shall we? Because the impact of the pandemic on NHS workers and patients will be examined today. That's as the public inquiry enters a new phase. Evidence this week will come from bereaved family members, as well as Unison, the trade union who represent many NHS workers. This stage of the inquiry is expected to focus on PPE in hospitals and the policy of shielding the most vulnerable. Meanwhile, an anti-corruption charity says it's identified significant concerns in contracts worth over £15 billion awarded by the Conservative government during the pandemic. That's equivalent to £1 in every £3 spent. The analysis from Transparency International found systemic bias and uncontrolled pricing resulted in a vast waste of public money.
We've looked at these 5,000 contracts. We've done a lot of the heavy lifting here. We identify 123 contracts worthy of further investigation, amounting to £15 billion of very concerning public spending during the COVID-19 pandemic. So please, government, relevant authorities, go away and conduct a forensic audit of all of those contracts to ascertain if there is money that could be clawed back where that's appropriate, or if there are other consequences for those involved if malpractices are found to have occurred.
A public inquiry into the unexplained deaths of thousands of mental health inpatients in Essex begins later today. Retired barrister Baroness Newlove will examine around 2,000 cases spanning over the course of 20 years. It's a major milestone for many families who've waited years for answers. Police are searching for 5 inmates, including a British convict who've escaped a high-security prison in Portugal. Mark Cameron Ross-Clear had been serving 9 years for kidnap and robbery at a complex north of Lisbon. Authorities say the 5 men had external help from accomplices who used a ladder to help get them out. Venezuela's opposition candidate has vowed to keep fighting for democracy after being granted asylum in Spain. Edmundo González fled his country after spending weeks in hiding due to an arrest warrant issued by the disputed president Nicolás Maduro. There's been turmoil there since elections in July, as Maduro's victory has not been recognised by a majority of foreign governments, and the opposition claims to have evidence that they, in fact, won the vote. In Edinburgh, a man is due in court today, charged in connection with the death of mum of 3, Kasia Smith. Kasia was last seen on a FaceTime call 11 months ago. Police believe she's no longer alive, although a body has never been found.
Yusra's here to tell us about a joint investigation between Sky News and Lighthouse Reports, which has uncovered evidence of an ethnically motivated massacre in Sudan. War broke out between government forces and militia groups in the capital, Khartoum, last year. The rebels, known as Rapid Support Forces, originated as an Arab tribal militia in the Darfur region. The area has a long history of ethnic conflict, culminating in the 2003 genocide. In June of last year, the rebel forces made one of their first major gains, taking the garrison in Khartoum. What followed in the town and the nearby displacement camp in Kasab was a massacre. Many of the survivors fled to camps on the border of North Darfur and eastern Chad, from where Yusra sent this report.
These are the women demanding answers, forced out of their homes by militias in a national war devastating Sudan that echoes the Darfur genocide of 20 years ago. My 13-year-old daughter is still missing since the day we fled, she says. I've no mother, no brother. I can't find anyone. And these are the men that terrorized her hometown, declaring victory to the Arabs over lifeless bodies. Our investigation with Lighthouse Reports reveals this rare, unseen footage. Evidence of ethnically motivated atrocities against civilians by militiamen, promising to make them suffer. We've identified the victims in this video. 5 brothers dragged out of their home and shot dead in broad daylight. One of them, Abdul Jabbar, was only 14 years old. Captured in a hunt of civilian men from non-Arab tribes.
They take what they want and torture any man they find. That is their goal. They never entered Arab houses in the neighborhood. They only go to the houses of black people, break in and take.
That's our neighbor, she says. He was walking to the well right next to his house. Then they shot and killed him. She says the attack was led by the Rapid Support Forces, the RSF, an Arab tribal militia turned paramilitary group waging a war against Sudan's army.
We woke up to the sound of bullets, lots of bullets. Suddenly the Arabs entered the town and started killing people in the streets.
Safia's husband was an army soldier killed in the battle, but civilian men in her family were targeted too.
My 3 cousins and 2 of my brothers were stood up and shot dead. My father would have been killed too if he hadn't fled.
Residents say they'd never seen anything like it, even compared to the 2003 conflict in Darfur, designated as genocide.
This time, these guys conquer the army and then they come for the civilians. If you have a car, they'll take it. They'll take anything in your home. If you have pretty sisters, they'll rape them.
Thousands of survivors are scattered in these camps, longing to return home and reunite with their families. Relatively safe, but still reeling from the day they were hunted door by door.
How did you find the atmosphere when you were there this time?
It was quite despairing, Kay. I think people feel like when they speak to us, and we've been 3 times now, that there will be change, that there'll be accountability. And what we felt this time was that they had realized that the international community had essentially forsaken them, that the urgency that they saw in 2003 genocide in Darfur had been only situational, that it was a one-off. People risked their lives to speak to us for this report. They showed a lot of strength. They crossed over, they came and met us, and the attacks are continuing to happen in their town, in Khartoum. And we hope that people will heed this call, that they'll see that these people are essentially trapped and that they are at the mercy of a militia that had already terrorized them 20 years ago. But essentially, this is a reminder to people that Darfur is still in a very critical position. And if you remember in the early 2000s, celebrities were saying, save Darfur, there were all these charity benefits and concerts. Yeah, and that helped. There was a United Nations and African Union joint mission, peacekeeping mission. There were peace talks, there were agreements. And the region did stabilize for around 15 years until this militia leader, the RSF head, managed to build this power base and get to the capital. And as he's trying to now control Sudan from the capital, his forces are in their home region, terrorizing civilians they've lived with side by side for decades.
You've got a longer report, of course, online, and we will see it throughout the day here on Sky News as well. For now, thanks very much indeed. Yusra will be answering your questions about her report in a live Q&A as well a bit later on today. Scan the QR code on the screen. There it is, right there, and submit your questions and tune in live from 1 o'clock this afternoon and check back in later to see her answers to them. Time now, though, for a look at the newspapers, and they suggest a difficult week ahead for the government. Here we go. It's looking something like this. The Daily Mail leads with the cuts to winter fuel payments, revealing Labour's own research shows axing the allowance to pensioners would lead to almost 4,000 excess deaths. The Times says up to 50 Labour MPs are struggling to support the government's plan on winter fuel payments. Many are expected to abstain during a Commons vote on the issue tomorrow. Guardian reports the Prime Minister is urging his MPs to get behind the plan, despite admitting it is unpopular. But households on lower incomes could receive cheaper energy bills under plans from ministers. That's according to the Eye. And finally, looking at the front page of The Sun, leading with a warning from probation staff that the early release of 2,000 prisoners will fuel crime. Tough time for the government this week. Morning.
Morning, yes. So all eyes will be on the size of the rebellion in the Commons tomorrow, Kay, as MPs vote on the government's proposal to scrap winter fuel payments for all but the poorest pensioners, so those receiving pension credit. It's a payment of up to £300 that every pensioner gets, regardless of how well off they are, in November each year. But under these new proposals, about 10 million pensioners will lose out to the entitlement. The government say, we know it's an unpopular decision, but we're making the difficult decisions, you hear that phrase a lot from Sir Keir Starmer, to fix the public finances. And they point out that the triple lock has been preserved, meaning pensioners' incomes have been protected at a time when a lot of other people's have been ravished by the cost of living crisis. But Labour backbenchers are uncomfortable with this, and it's not just those on the left of the party. So far, that's the wing that's posed the most problems for Sir Keir Starmer. It's across the spectrum, and we think about 30 could refuse to back the government on this policy. The question is, how will they display that discontent? Because they remember how the government treated those who refused to back their commitment to the two-child benefit cap by withdrawing the whip, suspending them from the party. So we actually think most of them will just abstain rather than vote against the policy. But then the headache doesn't end there for Sir Keir Starmer, because then it will go to the Lords. And if there is a big rebellion, that could embolden the Lords to throw the proposal out. Baroness Altman former pensions minister has actually tabled a fatal motion, and if that is successful, that means that they could just throw the whole thing out and the government would have to start again.
Goodness. Challenging week ahead for now. And of course, he's going to Washington, I think, at the weekend as well, isn't he? Thank you. Let's talk about the Paris 2024 Paralympic Games. It has drawn to a close, and it's been an incredibly successful Games for Paralympics GB, with a total of 124 medals, including 49 goals. Our sports correspondent Rob Harris has this report.
This was just what France and the world needed. Distraction from all the discord. Pessimism in Paris replaced with pride. The feel-good summer of sport ending with one final night of Paralympic partying.
Inspired by sport, I ask you all to be inspired with your commitment to change. Appreciation and applause must be followed by acceptance and action.
The flag bearers. Swimmer Poppy Maskell, who contributed most to the team, 3 golds and 2 silvers. And Matt Bush, leaving a taekwondo gold medalist after missing the last 2 games through injury. The final day beginning with 4 final medals added to the GB tally. In kayaking, titles were defended in their disability classes by Laura Sugar and Charlotte Henshaw, with Emma Wiggs replicating their GB 1-2 from Tokyo. While in the canoe sprint, there was debut silver for Jack Ayres after the pain of not making the squad last time. The last of 124 Paralympics GB medals. Finishing second again behind China in the table, thanks to almost £70 million from the lottery and government. The hope now that funding is not cut in the new Labour government spending review.
Investment in Olympic and Paralympic sport has to be worth it. I mean, it's about health and well-being. It creates that sense of identity and national pride. It's a real feel-good factor, and you know that's down to the hard work of the athletes and the support teams. And it's those performances on the field of play that ignites the imagination.
The message from Hannah Cockcroft, now a 9-time Paralympic champion. Consider how spending on sport can make society healthier and more inclusive.
As British athletes, we're so incredibly lucky to get equal support for both our Olympic athletes and our Paralympic athletes. I think that shows with our medal tally and how successful we are here as a team. But I think, you know, it is so important. Every other country looks up to us for that.
Britain's Paralympians and Olympians have shown that spending on talent translates into places on the podium. But is it worth it, and how to assess it? Questions that will be asked in France. Billions have been spent staging these games, even without the need to build an array of new venues. And Paris can bask in providing a wondrous summer of sport. The flame now extinguished. The Paralympics ending as the Olympics began 6 weeks ago in a downpour. But a Games that set the benchmark for the Americans to match. Send bright stars. With 4 years until it's LA's turn. Rob Harris, Sky News, Paris.
Looking at the weather for you on The Breakfast Show here on Sky News this Monday morning. Drier for most today, but it's going to turn colder and windier tomorrow with widespread blustery showers and some longer spells of rain. Northern and western parts are fairly clear and chilly, with early fog beginning to lift, while northern, central and eastern England are mild but cloudy. You're writing a novel there. What's going on?
I'm writing notes, don't worry. They'll come to fore in a moment.
OK, going to be described as the world's most dangerous chick. Is that what it's about?
Yeah.
OK, tell me then.
Well, it's notes as to why I don't think there should be more dangerous chicks about, but let's tell you about it in a first and foremost. It's hatched for the first time at a park in the Cotswolds. This is great news for the park in the Cotswolds. But we're talking about killer birds. And I don't know if the world needs more killer birds, but anyway, this is a very sweet chick. It is there somewhere bottom left of the screen, just underneath at the bottom there. This is a cassowary. It's a bird that, well, can run 31 miles an hour, has a 5-inch claw that can kill a human, can jump 7 feet and weighs 80 kilos. But the good news is...
80 kilos?
80 kilos. The good news is there are more of them. And this is the first time that one of these chicks has been hatched in the UK since 2021.
Is that the chick?
The chick is very well camouflaged, I feel as though it's key to point out. It's in the grass slightly beneath the father. This is the good news about this bird, though. The fathers are ever present, so they raise and incubate the eggs.
Right.
So this is the good news part of the story, but the rest of it is absolute terror.
OK. I'm not sure I'm particularly interested either way.
Well, they're the
You haven't sold it.
They're the third largest breed in the world as well, after the emu and the
Okay.
ostrich. But yeah, they've got these incredible long
Here's
talons.
a killer chick, you can't see it.
Here's a chick. We'll sort that out in due
Okay.
course. The facts are remarkable, but I don't think we need more.
No, I'm with you. Still to come on The Breakfast Show for you. You'll like this one. We speak to the General Secretary of the Trades Union Congress as unions prepare to go to war with Sir Keir Starmer on wages, winter fuel payments and workers' rights. Also ahead, the impact of protests on the UK's tourism sector laid bare in a new report.
We're going to evict crazy Kamala.
Donald Trump is an unserious man.
The most incompetent and far-left vice president in American history.
The American people deserve better.
She breaks everything that she touches.
Donald Trump tried to throw away your votes.
Kamala, who's a Marxist.
Imagine Donald Trump with no guardrails.
I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
Wall Street! Wall Street!
Well, the plan seems to be to head to the police station where the policeman who fired the shots was based.
And everything you know, his memories is all gone.
In almost every corner, this town has been completely destroyed by the fire. I've witnessed the remarkable passion for politics here, but the anger too.
We have to get Trump out of the White House.
Is this the moment to reform gun laws?
You know, it's easy to go to politics.
But it's important. It's at the heart of the issue.
I get that that's where the media likes to go.
No, it's not. It's where many of the people we've talked to here like to go.
I report on the biggest stories from around the world. This is a town that is effectively encircled by the Russians. You say it's all fabrication, what's happening in Bucha?
Destroyed my nation.
We take you to the heart of stories that shape our planet. Yeah, I can hear now quite a few explosions in the distance here in Jerusalem. A very violent series of confrontations here. What do you think of ISIS?
Everybody here knows the truth of ISIS.
They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Tanks, heavy vehicle.
Why only in America?
People want their country to work.
Just want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.
Hello again, everybody. Welcome back to The Breakfast Show here on Sky News Monday morning. Coming up in a moment, we're chatting to the boss of the TUCs at his conference. That to come, but first...
The top stories this morning, let's remind you of those. Thousands of victims of antisocial behaviour say they're not being listened to by authorities. Sky News has had a first look at a landmark report into the scale of the problem. A joint investigation by Sky News and Lighthouse Reports has uncovered evidence of an ethnically motivated massacre in Sudan. Bristol Street Hospital has apologised to families and launched an urgent review into more than 700 cases as the work of a former consultant at the hospital is being investigated. Pressure is mounting on the Prime Minister as dozens of Labour MPs are reportedly refusing to support the government's proposal to cut the winter fuel allowance to pensioners in a Commons vote scheduled for tomorrow.
Nick's with us this morning. If you were with us earlier, you'll have seen him talking about his latest report into what I would have called ASBOs in my time. What are they called now?
Well, I mean, the subject is antisocial behaviour, but the government's plan is to bring in new respect orders, which sounds a lot like ASBOs of old. That's the measures that the last Labour government brought in under Tony Blair, which was designed to cut down on all this bad behaviour. They had a checkered rate of success, really. So it's interesting to try and pick through what these new respect orders actually mean. And we tried to get that from the government as part of this investigation, Kay, that we've been looking into. One community in Kent, we've been with them for the last 6 months, trying to understand why some of the problems that they've been having are still going on, despite repeated calls to police and councils. They are, say they're living in fear.
And what did the government actually do? You say respect orders, which are basically 21st century ASBOs. Are they likely to make any difference?
So the idea would be that that's a sanction placed on an individual who is persistently carrying out antisocial behaviour. What do we mean by that? It could be noise, it could be drug taking in parks, it could be riding motorbikes, setting fires to things. It covers a whole range of things. Respect orders, we think, and we've tried to ask the Minister for more detail, would be some kind of court order which restricts that person's behaviour, and if they persist, they can face criminal sanctions. It was in the manifesto. It's been quite a big one of their 6 priorities of Labour's to tackle antisocial behaviour. But this new report out by Baroness Newlove today, the Victims Commissioner, says that 70% of people say that their reports have gone unresolved. It is a huge issue. 1 million reported cases of antisocial behaviour a year in Britain. And it's something that I know, because my inbox is pinging a lot this morning, and we've only just put this story on, that a lot of people are having similar experiences. So if you are watching this and you are having problems, do get in touch with me via my Twitter, Nick Martin Sky, and we will have a look at it for them.
OK, Baroness Newlove, of course, whose husband was murdered by a gang of youths who were behaving badly at the end of the road. For now, thank you. Leader of the Trades Union Congress speaks this afternoon, but before that, he is with us here on the programme. Hello to you, Mr Novak. It's always good to see you. Thanks for taking the time to join us. Let's talk about these pensions, first of all, should we, and these winter fuel payments. The Health Secretary says he's not remotely happy about it. How does the TUC feel about it?
Morning, Kay. I think we've got real concerns about this decision to take those winter fuel allowance payments away from pensioners, Kay. I don't want any pensioner going into the winter worried about putting the heating on. And so, you know, we'll debate it during our Congress this week. I hope that the Chancellor will set out in the budget what she's going to do to make sure those pensioners, not just those on pensioner tax credit, but, you know, those who aren't well off by any means, do go into the winter confident that they can heat their homes and stay safe and comfortable.
The General Secretary of the Unite Union, who you'll know well, Sharon Graham, calling on the government, in her words, to tax the rich to fund the winter fuel payments. Do you concur with that?
Well, I think it's not just about the winter fuel payments, Kay. I've long called for a national debate about tax in this country. The TUC believes, for example, and the Prime Minister said this last week, didn't he, that those with the broadest shoulders should do the heaviest lifting at the budget. And so I expect, for example, the government to think about things like capital gains tax. I think it's incredible that those who get their income from shares or property pay a low rate of tax than someone who works in a school or in a warehouse. I absolutely think there's a debate to be had about wealth taxes in this country. You know, not everybody lived through a cost of living crisis. Many people have done well over the last 2 or 3 years, and I think it's fair that they pay their fair share.
The Prime Minister coming to speak to conference, I think, tomorrow. First time since 2009 that a Labour leader in power, in government, has spoken to the conference. What do you want him to say?
Well, we will have a senior government speaker tomorrow. I want the Prime Minister and any other government spokesperson to be very clear that they are getting on with the job of delivering their new deal for workers. I mean, biggest upgrade of workers' rights in a generation, much needed, because for far too many people, work is low paid and insecure. I hope that a government speaker also sets out what we are going to do to repair and rebuild our public services. I can't think of one public service now that is better now than it was 14 years ago. That's, that nearly a decade and a half of negligence and austerity have meant everything from our schools, our hospitals, our local councils have been decimated. So I think what we need is a message of hope. I mean, Labour have got a real mandate from the British public, 174-seat majority. We know you can't fix the mess overnight, but a Labour government working positively with unions, with employers, to get this country back on its feet, I think is absolutely essential.
We keep hearing about this £20 billion black hole that the Chancellor will have to fill one way or another. What's that going to mean when it comes to public sector pay rises?
Well, we've said to the government what they need to do is set up a public services workforce commission to talk to unions, but to public sector employers as well, about the recruitment and retention crisis in our public services. I don't see any future in rebuilding our public services if you can't pay the people who deliver those services properly and fairly. So we fundamentally do need pay rises for public sector workers. In fact, we need to see wages rising right across the public and private sector. So, the government, Labour said before the election, we could expect no return to austerity. I think that's absolutely the right approach. And as I said, the Prime Minister said very clearly that he expects those with the broadest shoulders to do the heaviest lifting. And I hope that the budget reflects that, because you can't ask teachers and clinical support workers or firefighters to do the heavy job of repairing our public services. We need to fundamentally rethink things like tax.
And just a thought from you, if you would please, about these suggestions of youth mobility, in that potentially Keir Starmer may allow young people from Europe to come to work in the UK and vice versa. Good idea?
Yeah, I think we do need that broad reset of our relationships with Europe, and that means, making sure we've got a trade and cooperation agreement that supports supply chains here in the UK, but in Europe as well, but also gives opportunities to our young people. So we'd need to see the detail, but I think that's a good first step in terms of, resetting our relationship with our closest trading partners, and I think good for young people in this country, but good for young people in Europe as well.
Have a good conference. Good to talk to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Kay. Thank you.
Let's talk about protests, whether they're putting off tourists or not. Those recent scenes of violence led some foreign governments, including countries like Canada, to warn their citizens to exercise extreme caution before travelling to the UK. What impact has it had? David Spencer, Head of Crime and Justice at the Policy Exchange, is with us. Good to see you.
Good morning.
What did your report find?
So it's a pretty significant report with 26 recommendations. The big point that we found is that the way that protests are being policed and the legal regime is at huge odds from the mood of the public. So the public want to see more action by the police, and they would support more action by the police at protests. But particularly that what we're seeing is that members of the public are staying away from places like London and other cities when there are protests going on. So we found that well over 2/3 or just over 2/3 of people say that they wouldn't come in to go to a restaurant, they wouldn't go shopping, they would, particularly if they had young people, children or elderly or disabled people with them, they would avoid coming into London. Of course,
reasonable.
And of course, a city like London, which is so dependent on tourism, this is a significant finding, we think.
Yeah. In what situations does the public support police intervention in disruptive protests?
A huge range. And here we were looking at measures of 85% of the public saying they would support intervention. So that might be disrupting the road, so sitting down in the road and preventing traffic from being able to move, the presence of racist or derogatory slogans, shouting, people being intimidating and shouting at passers-by. All of these sorts of things, a huge range of things. They're actually less supportive of intervention, where it is just a peaceful, quiet protest, that sort of situation, the public are actually pretty tolerant of. But where you have shouting, very large numbers and derogatory slogans, that's where the public want to see intervention.
And what about the swift sentencing of protesters, as we've seen over the last few weeks? Does that have much support?
Well, certainly we don't cover that in terms of the polling, but certainly the conversations that we've had, there's huge support for that. And certainly our view, and we cover this in the report, is that the police action, very robust, and the swift sentencing should absolutely be supported.
OK, and when you're talking about peaceful protest, What does that include? What would when we've seen the pro-Palestinian protests, for example, what category does that fall into?
Well, of course, I can't speak for every single protester,
No, of course.
but where we see people chanting slogans that are derogatory, where we've heard, certainly in the first 6 months, 400 arrests being taken place, a number of them, 15 of them, for terrorist offences. It's very difficult to see that shouting for jihad in the street, it is impossible, in fact, to see those things as peaceful protests.
What about two-tier policing? We're hearing a lot about that at the moment. It certainly upset the Commissioner recently.
Well, the point that we make about two-tier or differential policing, as we term it, is that the big problem is there's just a lack of transparency here. It's very difficult to say whether there's a systemic sort of two-tier or differential approach by the police, and the reason for that is they're so secretive in terms of who advises them, what advice they're getting, and the answer to that is more transparency, so we can really see what's at work here.
What do you want the government to take away from this report?
Well, as you say, there's 26 recommendations, so it's a big report, and it's supported by a couple of former Home Office ministers, a couple of Ministry of Justice ministers, Labour and Conservative, and a former Commissioner of the Met Police. They're about to do a big review of protest and public order legislation. And I think what we need to see is that some of the recommendations we make about the thresholds for police intervention, they really need to take attention of.
Am I right, on a personal level, you were a police officer previously?
I was,
OK.
yeah.
What's it like when you find yourself facing the sort of challenges that we saw for some of our police officers over the summer?
I mean, it's incredibly challenging, and I can't not be here and comment on the remarkable courage of police officers on the front line. It's very, very difficult. The one thing that you know is that you've got colleagues with you who've got your back, and that really makes all the difference in every policing situation. One of the things that we've seen in more recent years, of course, is every single policing situation, from the smallest to the biggest that we saw this summer, is filmed on video. And I don't just mean one person, 10, 20, 30 people at a scene of something, filming something, and that can be quite difficult, knowing that you might end up on Sky News next morning for just doing your job normally.
OK, it's good to see you. Thanks for taking the time. Thanks for telling us about the report. Much appreciated. Let's talk about Sir Alan Bates, should we? The man who led the campaign for justice for hundreds of sub-postmasters. He's married his long-term partner on a Caribbean island. But it was no ordinary service. The island is owned by Sir Richard Branson, who officiated at the wedding. Rachel Venables has the story.
Gather around, everybody, as Echo would say.
On a luxury island a world away from their home in North Wales, Sir Alan Bates married his long-term partner, Suzanne Sercombe.
A party we do if you commit to taking one another as partners from this day forward as husband and wife. We do!
Virgin tycoon boss Sir Richard Branson officiated the ceremony on his private island.
Thanks you, husband and wife.
It all started when Sir Alan told a newspaper in January, "If Richard Branson is reading this, I'd love a holiday." And the billionaire came through. The need for a holiday came after decades of campaigning, dramatised this year in ITV's Mr Bates versus the Post Office. It told the story of the biggest miscarriage of justice in British history. This summer, he received a knighthood for his work.
And what does it mean to you personally to see Alan and yourself, because you will become a lady, honoured in this way?
Well, he says I'm a lady already, which is very nice. I do worry about wearing a hat. I think we'll just be the same two people laughing with each other and knocking about.
And this surprise destination wedding means the woman who's supported him for decades now becomes Lady Bates. Rachel Venables, Sky News.
And Lady Bates apparently had no idea at all, so she had to make do with her sundress because he didn't tell her, so she didn't pack a wedding dress. There you go. Still to come on The Breakfast Show for you here on Sky News. A spectacular end to a Golden Games for Paralympics GB in Paris as Great Britain finished second again in the medal table.
Weeknights on Sky News.
This is your chance. Tell people.
Welcome to the Politics Hub.
Our police force has apologised.
If you want to find out about Grimsby, you come to the docks.
I'm live in Jerusalem.
Are you not concerned that that could lead to all-out war?
Hello there, good evening. There are fears of an upsurge in violence. What's at stake here?
You are watching the press preview, a first look at the front pages as they arrive.
I'm Katie Spencer and I'm Sky News' arts and entertainment correspondent. When you think of Glastonbury, it's mud you want and music. They're going to cross to us live in a minute.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Brad Pitt is now a prolific producer behind the scenes.
It's not a mystery to me. We always were capable of doing this.
Oh, they're wonderful children as an audience.
Who did that? Maverick here on the red carpet. I'm so excited, Tom Cruise. This is the story of the night.
It's the little independent film that could.
We take you to the heart of the stories that shape our world.
Nor have I ever struck any woman in my life.
There's this illusion of power.
Are you feeling well? I remember covering the Oscars and that now infamous moment, the Will Smith slap. Nobody could quite believe that it had happened. You can tell from these crowds just how excited people are for the return of Pride.
These actors playing the lead roles were born long after the Sex Pistols broke up.
Are you pleased that you did say yes to the job?
I've never regretted it.
As a team, we've interviewed some of the biggest stars in the world. It can be incredibly surreal being swept up in their world, but we try to give you an honest sense of how these people really are.
Okay, I'll talk to you.
Don't leave me.
Yeah, okay.
There's no easy goodies. There's no easy baddies.
I've had a great time here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Play Sky News.
From the Sky News Centre at 7.
Now that you're up to date, we can go into a bit more detail.
Things can change incredibly quickly.
Taken by surprise.
Have you ever known a moment like this in British politics before? Yes. Cheers.
We'll start with breaking news.
Let's get the latest on the ground.
So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better.
I'm Greg Milam, and I'm Sky's chief North of England correspondent. I've reported from around the world and around the UK.
I'm Mark Stone, I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Washington, DC. And beyond the United States, from across the world, I report on the biggest stories.
I'm Stuart Ramsey, and I'm Sky's chief correspondent.
I'm David Blevins, and I'm Sky's senior Ireland correspondent.
Hello again, everybody. Welcome back to The Breakfast Show here on Sky News Monday morning. The Paralympic torch has been handed from Paris to Los Angeles. British team did sensationally. Ross Wilson, British Paralympic table tennis player, is with us now. Hi, Ross. Good to see you. How was it?
Good morning. Yeah, it looked amazing. It was great to watch, wasn't it? So, yeah, I think it's amazing. Like, you know, Paris have really put on a show for us all.
Why are we so good in the Paralympics? Second in the table, just behind China.
I know, you know, I think for me, since London, really, I think we've really done well and we've dominated a lot of different sports. And I think London was the turning point, wasn't it, where a lot more people came to realise what the Paralympics was about. And I think France have done a really, really good job with that as well, to be honest, because since London, there's not been those huge crowds, because obviously with Rio, there was the Zika virus, and then with Tokyo, we've had COVID. So it's been amazing to see the turnout in the crowds in France. And you know, they really, really have put on a show.
You were a medal winner, of course, in Tokyo. What was it like without having the crowds there?
Yeah, well, I think, to be honest, in Paralympic sport, a lot of the time you won't get those big crowd turnouts. And to go and compete in Tokyo was a strange feeling, because it's you know, it's one of the biggest competitions of your life, and you can't share it with the people that you love. My family love loved supporting me, and a lot of them had come out and booked tickets to come and see me and tried to. And, you know, my uncle had learned Japanese to come and watch. So it was such a shame to not be able to share it with them. And but, you know, that happened. So it's really nice to be able to see that in France.
Is it the lottery money that makes the difference for athletes in the UK?
Most definitely. I think if you speak to pretty much all of the athletes, you'll find that we wouldn't be able to do what we do without that lottery funding. And, you know, we get our obviously our training venues, all our support staff, which can I just say make the world of difference as well. We work with psychologists, lifestyle advisors, physios. And I think in the UK, in Great Britain, I think Paralympics GB do an amazing job of helping and supporting us with those facilities. And I think that's what pushes us on to, you know, go and win 49 gold medals and however many more medals we won overall. It's an amazing amount.
I think it was 124 in Tokyo, and I think it was even more this time, wasn't it? I haven't got the number quite in front of me, but yeah, amazing. Yeah. Are you still competing?
Yeah, still competing. I think for me, I finished. I qualified one position out for Paris, so I missed out, unfortunately. But I think that goes to show, you know, the standard of the Paralympic Games. I've medalled at the last three, and I've just missed out on qualifying for this one. And the standard is constantly going up and up and up. And I think that's a really personally an amazing thing as well to see, is just how good the standard is in Paralympic sport now.
And how do you think it'll be in LA?
I think it will be constantly rising. You know, for me personally, again, I'm gonna obviously knuckle down. I'm doing a degree alongside my training, so it's been quite hard to navigate. And I think now I've kind of got my goal for LA, and I think it will be an amazing games as well. So everything towards that now.
Fantastic. What are you doing your degree in?
Psychology.
Oh, clever clogs. Good luck with that, and good luck with continuing to be absolutely amazing at table tennis. It's good to see you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye. Quick look at the weather for you now here on Sky News. Monday morning, drier for most today, but it'll turn colder and windier tomorrow with widespread blustery showers and some longer spells of rain. Northern and western parts are fairly clear and chilly, with early fog beginning to lift, while northern, central and eastern England are mild but cloudy with a little patchy rain. Northern and central England will brighten this morning, but eastern parts will stay cloudy. Quick look at what's happening as far as the papers are concerned. Let's start with the Daily Mail, leading with the cuts to winter fuel payments, revealing Labour's own research shows axing the allowance to pensioners, they say, would lead to almost 4,000 excess deaths.
The Times says up to 50 Labour MPs are struggling to support the government's plans on winter fuel payments. Many are expected to abstain during a Commons vote on the issue tomorrow.
Well, The Guardian reports that the Prime Minister is urging his MPs to get behind the plan, despite admitting it is unpopular, and it's going to be up for vote tomorrow.
Yes, that's right, tomorrow.
How much pressure is he under?
The government is expected to win the vote, but up to 30 could abstain. We're not expecting any to refuse outright. Many to refuse outright.
OK. Households on lower incomes could receive cheaper energy under plans from ministers. That's according to the Eye.
The Sun leads with a warning from probation staff that the early release of 2,000 prisoners will fuel crime.
Let's move on to the Daily Mail, shall we? Reporting that the National Health Service...
The Telegraph,
That is the Telegraph, indeed. Points to Gryffindor. The NHS is in decline for the first time in half a century. That's citing a report commissioned by the government, which will be presented later this week.
Yeah, we're also I think I'm right in saying that Secretary of State Blinken's in town today, but
yes.
He's doing events tomorrow.
Tomorrow, I think, yeah, that's right.
OK.
Follows, obviously, lots of shuttle diplomacy in the Middle East, hasn't he? He's probably been the busiest man in the White House administration, one could argue, but lots of diplomacy there, trying to bring together lots of the world and see what he has to say when he comes here as well. And obviously there was that joint speech as well, wasn't it? The head of MI6 and the head of the CIA, kind of the joint speech as well, kind of their take on the situation in Ukraine and obviously the situation with regards to China and Taiwan and kind of emerging threats and global dynamics.
And I think I'm also right in saying that the Prime Minister is going to Washington on Friday. That's the second time he's been since he's been elected.
Yeah.
So let's see if we see any movement as far as the Middle East is concerned.
And hopes of a trade deal as well.
Of course, because that's still not done, that trade deal, is it? So let's wait and see what happens as far as that's concerned as well. And it's the TUC conference going on at the moment, and I think I'm right in saying that Keir Starmer is going there tomorrow, although when I spoke to the head of the TUC, he was a little bit cagey about that.
He's expected to speak tomorrow.
That's what I thought.
At the conference, yeah.
OK.
I think Angela Rayner is addressing delegates later today.
Is she? And Rachel Reeves as well, I'm guessing?
Yeah, Rachel Reeves will probably turn up as well.
I would have thought so.
There was an interview the other day with one of the head chefs from the parliamentary estate who said that Keir Starmer was a grab-and-go man when it comes to his meals. And based on his diary of recent days, that much is for sure. He is jetting around everywhere. Although US coming second to Germany in terms of the number of FaceTimes, because Mayor Olaf Scholz 5 times now. In what, 2 months?
Yeah,
and
that's right.
Only
and Macron
2 meetings with the US, Macron 4. So very much, you can see that European pivot, can't you? That attempt to re-establish, reconnect, reset those ties with the European Union.
Lots of the papers.
US comes second.
Yeah, lots of the papers this morning talking about the picture, the portrait of Margaret Thatcher that was in the office of the Prime Minister, and he's had it taken down. He says, he says it's because he doesn't like people looking down on him. I think it might have something to do with the fact that it's Margaret Thatcher. He says he'd prefer... And I think we've also got the name of the cat.
But he said he admired Margaret Thatcher in an interview recently with The Telegraph. So, you know...
Well, and The Telegraph, the clue's there, isn't it? Right there. The cat's called Prince.
Prince, yes.
Yeah.
Prince.
Did you see there's now 3 cats in Downing Street?
Yeah, there are 3 cats, yeah. Apparently more might be coming. Rachel Reeves.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Goodness.
Harry spent all of that morning just sat outside number 10, didn't he? As soon as the cat that arrived for the kids, because the kids wanted Alsatian. So Keir settled with a cat, and the one resident cat who's been there for 11 years ended up sat outside.
Yeah.
The family dynamics are being frayed.
But they've also got another cat.
They have got another cat. And the biggest challenge was the bomb-proof door and putting a cat flap in it.
Yeah, I don't think they did. All today's top stories coming up for you in just a few moments here on Sky News Monday morning. Stay tuned our way.
I say, bring it on.
With America divided and tensions running high, get ready for an election like no other.
Join our teams as we follow the campaign trail as America decides.
We will win, win, win.
Get closer to the action this US election with full reaction and analysis.
Sky News, the full story first.
Morning, everybody. It's 8 o'clock. Coming up on today's programme for you, a landmark report finds that victims of antisocial behaviour say their fears are ignored.
Yeah, I've spent 6 months investigating antisocial behaviour, spending time with a community that feels like nobody listens.
And we'll be live in Paris, where Britain's Paralympians are preparing for a triumphant homecoming. More than half of the 215 British athletes who competed won a medal.
Good for them. It's Monday, the 9th of September.
Hello, I've just phoned and asked for fire brigades and police. We've just realised that whatever's on fire looks like a motorbike.
Lives blighted by antisocial behaviour, but 2/3 of complaints are ignored or unresolved. Also ahead, Sky News uncovers evidence of an ethnically motivated massacre in Sudan. Great Ormond Street Hospital launches an urgent review into a former surgeon involving the treatment of more than 700 children. Plus pressure on the Prime Minister over plans to cut the winter fuel allowance for 10 million pensioners. We'll speak to the government in the next few moments. Paris says farewell to the Paralympics and a glorious summer of sport with a spectacular fireworks display. Morning, everybody. Thousands of victims of antisocial behaviour say they're being let down and left living in fear. Sky News has had first sight of a landmark report from England Wales's Victims Commissioner, which reveals that more than 2/3 of people who have reported antisocial behaviour haven't had their complaints resolved. We'll get more from Nick in just a moment, but first, here's his report.
Oh my God. Yeah, I've just phoned the police and the fire brigade.
So a gang of boys dumped a bike?
It's a gang of boys have dumped a bike. They've created a fire.
This is the terrifying moment a motorbike is set on fire just yards from a family's back garden.
My house backs onto the Wilmot Park and it's been set alight in front of the gates and there's black smoke billowing in the air.
This is one of a million reported cases of antisocial behaviour each year, blighting communities across Britain. Paul filmed that incident. He says he's been reporting antisocial behaviour for years and thinks very little has been done to help him and his neighbours.
I've been trying since we moved in here in 2016 to try and get the council to pay attention to this. It massively gives us huge amounts of anxiety and stress, lack of sleep.
Now a major new report into antisocial behaviour reveals that thousands of victims, like Paul, aren't getting enough help. The Victims Commissioner for England and Wales found that 2/3 of people who reported antisocial behaviour said their problems hadn't been resolved. Half said the problems had been ongoing for 5 years or more. The majority, more than 60%, reported it to multiple agencies like police, councils and housing associations. And a staggering 70% said they received no support at all. Labour says tackling antisocial behaviour is one of its key priorities. Dame Diana Johnson is the new policing minister.
What are you going to do to try and clear up when someone rings up and something's happening in their street? The fobbing off of it's a council thing, it's a police thing. That is a government thing. That is going to be something that you have to figure out.
Absolutely, and I recognise that.
What are you going to do?
I recognise that as a constituency MP because I've had constituents say to me, I've rung the council or I've rung the police, nobody comes, nothing's done. So I think it is about recognising we need to get much better at this joined-up approach to dealing with what's going on in communities and tackling the individuals who are causing the problems to families.
Kent Police told us that they are aware of local concerns and is working with Dartford Council to address these issues. They said they attended within hours of the motorbike incident but haven't caught those responsible, adding, "We have teams who regularly patrol the area and also have a dedicated beat officer who residents can talk to directly." Dartford Council said they had stepped up patrols here, urging residents to report incidents to police.
It obviously makes you want to move. It doesn't make you want to live here anymore.
What's the government doing about it?
Well, the government, as you'll know, in the run-up to the election, had antisocial behaviour as one of its 6 priorities. They want to bring in new laws, respect orders. That's very similar to what they brought in 25 years ago, antisocial behaviour orders, like a sanction on persistent offenders. But we're yet really, Kate, to get the full detail on that. But what's interesting from that story is that we first got to that park in March this year when residents were telling us that they were having problems, and we've stayed with those residents from March until now. And after every incident, they were providing video, they were providing logs to the police and council, but yet no one's been held accountable for that bike fire at the bottom of that garden, for example. And so whilst residents are being urged, keep logs, be your own detective, you know, take video, take evidence. A lot of cases, and this is borne out by Baroness Newlove's report, cases are not being resolved and people are not feeling like this antisocial behaviour is being tackled. And it's a huge issue. We've only just published this report, Kay, but my inbox is absolutely flooding with people who are saying, we've got a problem, this is happening on our estate, we're being threatened regularly. And I think the numbers suggest that even though this is not a new problem, antisocial behaviour has been around for many, many years, there is a lack of support for people from councils and police and government.
OK. Longer report, of course, Nick, later on. For now, thank you. You can see that extended version of Nick's report, Fault Lines, Living in Fear, coming up on Sky News throughout the day. And we'll, of course, have more on that from 10:30, 12:30, 2:30, 6:30 and 8 p.m. You can also catch Nick's report online as well. And he will be back with us again later on. Well, let's talk about it in more detail, should we? Joining us now, pleased to say that we have with us the Minister of State for Crime, Policing and Fire, Dame Diana Johnson. It's good to see you.
Good morning.
Thanks for taking the time. What are you doing about these unresolved cases? We've got this new, no longer ASBOs, are they? They're called respect orders. How are they different? How are they going to help?
So we're going to introduce respect orders, and that's going to be another tool that's available to the police. What it's going to do is it will have preventative measures, so it will stop some of the prolific offenders going into our town centres and causing disruption and antisocial behaviour. But it will also have some positive measures attached. So, for example, it might be that they need to go on alcohol awareness training to understand or their anger management, things like that. So it's kind of preventative and also trying to deal with what the problem is, the deep-rooted problem. That's a respect order that will be introduced. It's not in force yet.
And what is the difference between a respect order and an ASBO?
Well, I think because it has that second limb to it of actually trying to tackle and deal with the problem that the person's exhibiting. So whether it's alcohol or drugs or anger, dealing with that. An ASBO order, as I understand it currently, can only deal with the bit of stopping them doing something. This will have an arrest attached to it as well.
OK, and what about people that are finding themselves falling between two stools, as we just heard there in Nick's report? They don't know whether the council are going to help them or the police are going to help them. They ring the police, they say, I've got a motorbike on fire at the bottom of my garden, and they want you to contact the council. Surely that can't be right.
That can't be, no, and I agree with that. And as a local MP, I've had this in my own surgery where people have come to me and said, we've tried them, we've tried the council, we've tried the police, no one comes, nothing's done. And so that has to be part of bringing together, joining up the response to victims, because victims have to be at the heart of this, and services have to fit around the victim. So with antisocial behaviour, we need to make sure if it's the council or it's the police, somebody does act and somebody comes and something is done.
OK, but who decides whether it's the police or the council?
Well, I think that's for local areas to decide how they work this out. But clearly, as a minister, I want joined up services. I want the victim, the person who's suffering from antisocial behaviour, not to feel they're pulled from pillar to post, but they get the service they need. And that hasn't happened in the past. And that's one of the things I'm going to be testing with councils and with the police to make sure there is that joined up approach.
I'm reading in the Times this morning that abuse victims are paying the price for jail crisis, is how they put it. Basically, 2,000 prisoners, up to 2,000 prisoners will be released early. Many of them are going to be domestic abusers. What does that mean for those that were the victims of those domestic abusers?
Well, first of all, nobody wants to be doing this.
But you are.
But we are because of what we've inherited. So I think that's worth saying.
Still doing it.
I think the Home Secretary and the Minister for Safeguarding has been working with the Ministry of Justice to make sure that for domestic abuse perpetrators, that there is particular attention paid to them. Now, we know with domestic abuse, often the person who's serving the prison sentence might not be charged with one of the domestic abuse offences like stalking or harassment. It might be something like assault, which doesn't necessarily flag that it's domestic abuse. So there's been a real piece of work done to try and identify those individuals who will be released where there is a concern about domestic abuse. And that means then there can be referrals into the local risk assessment conferences. If there's children involved, referrals to the council and social services. Also, this Clare's law, where women particularly can be informed if there's a history of domestic abuse with a partner or a new partner. So there's a whole range of steps that have been put in place to make sure that we try and minimise that risk. But of course, it's wholly unsatisfactory that we're having to take these steps at this point.
Yeah, but the Justice Secretary said on a Sky podcast that prisoners released early wouldn't be domestic abusers.
Well, first of all, there is a group of people who have been convicted of domestic abuse offences like stalking and harassment. They will not be released. Neither will serious violent offenders or terrorist offenders. But what I'm saying to you is there are those who we know have carried out domestic abuse who may not be in prison for a domestic abuse offence that's flagged. What's happening, because of the work of Jess Phillips and the Home Secretary, there's been a real trawl through to try and identify where their primary offence isn't domestic abuse. We know there's a history, and that's where the steps have been put in to protect as best we can, because we know, unfortunately, domestic abuse is so prevalent amongst the offending community.
OK. Reports that prisoners are going to be sent to Estonia to free up places in our jails. Is that the case?
Not to my knowledge, no.
OK, so Estonia's law crime rate is significantly lower. We were speaking to the Justice Minister, and she said that it had been discussed with the UK Justice Secretary.
I've no knowledge of that. I really can't help you on that. But what I do know is we need to get a grip of our own prison estate in this country, and we need to make sure that we are putting into prison those people who need to be locked up. And we are dealing, as I'm sure you will know, the new prisons ministry is looking at the prison population, looking at those prisoners with mental health issues or addiction issues, and seeing what more can be done to address those problems.
Do you think it's a good idea?
Build enough estates in this country.
Do you think it's a good idea?
To take people to Estonia. I've not been involved in that discussion at all.
Do you think it's a good idea?
I think we need to have a prison estate in this country that works for what we need in this country.
OK. Do you think removing winter fuel payments from some pensioners is a good idea?
I think it's a really difficult decision and not one that any of us want to take. If I just refer to the Home Office, we found a £6.4 billion black hole in our budget. I know the Chancellor is having to look across government and make really difficult decisions. I think alongside, if we do that tomorrow and there's a vote in Parliament, we need to make sure that the pension credit, the application for that perhaps is improved, and we encourage people to make that application, because we know some of the poorest and most vulnerable are not getting everything they're entitled to. If they apply for pension credit, that will be a gateway through to receiving winter fuel allowance. There's more we can do around insulating homes. There's more we can do around energy bills. But it is a really difficult decision, and I know many of my colleagues are really concerned about it, as I am.
You're going to vote in favour of it, then?
I am, because I recognise the really difficult decision that the Chancellor's had to make, looking across government and the economic inheritance that we've got.
The leader of the TUC, I was asking him about it this morning, and he said it's the wrong thing to do.
I think it's a really tough decision. Nobody wants to make this.
But you think it's the right thing to do?
I think in government, one of the things you have to do is make tough decisions. And unfortunately, this is one of the first ones that we're having to deal with. But we know that we are also committed to the triple lock on pensions, and we've got the budget coming up in October. So I think all the options are being looked at by government as to how to make sure the poorest and most vulnerable do not suffer.
Labour government voting in favour of taking money off pensioners.
Yeah, nobody wants to do that. Nobody wants to do that. But we also have to recognise this £22 million black hole that's been identified.
22 billion. And, you know, in the great scheme of things, given the amount of money that the government spends every year, I think it's 1.6 trillion. I think I'm right in saying that. You know, it's not a lot of money. And trying to fill that hole by taking money off pensioners.
Well, it's one of the difficult decisions that the Prime Minister has talked about that this government will be making. We don't want to shy away, as previous governments have done, from making tough decisions. It's a hard one. I fully appreciate that. And, you know, my inbox is full of emails about this, so I'm not pretending this isn't hard. But it is one of the tough decisions that we are going to have to take to get the finances back on track.
New coalition on knife crime. Tell me about it.
Well, this is a very positive story in light of the decades-long increase that we've seen in knife crime. This is bringing together activists and families with the Prime Minister today to set up a body that will work with government to make sure that we've got evidence-based policy and that we are being held to account for our manifesto promise, which is to halve knife crime over the next decade. We're already taking practical steps as well. The zombie knife ban comes into place in a couple of weeks' time. We're working on the ninja sword ban, again, a promise in our manifesto, after the horrific case in Wolverhampton in 2022, where a young person was able to go online and buy a ninja sword, collect it from the post office, no checks at all, and then went on to kill. And we know the family in that case have campaigned for that ban, and we will be bringing that in. We've got a senior police officer looking at where the gaps are in the online sales of knives, what more we can do about that for the under-18s to stop it happening. So practical steps, but today is about the establishment of this coalition, which will be an important part in holding us to account.
I know you've got a busy morning, so I must let you go. It's good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Joint investigation between Sky News and Lighthouse Reports has uncovered evidence of an ethnically motivated massacre in Sudan. War broke out between government forces and militia groups in the capital Khartoum last year. The rebels, known as Rapid Support Forces, originated as an Arab tribal militia in the Darfur region. The area has a long history of ethnic conflict, culminating in the 2003 genocide. In June of last year, the rebel forces made one of their first major gains, taking the garrison in Kutum. What followed in the town and the nearby displacement camp in Kasab was a massacre. Many of the survivors fled to camps on the border of North Darfur and also eastern Chad, from where our Africa correspondent Yusra El-Bagir sent this report. Thank you, Minister.
These are the women demanding answers, forced out of their homes by militias in a national war devastating Sudan that echoes the Darfur genocide of 20 years ago. My 13-year-old daughter is still missing since the day we fled, she says. I've no mother, no brother. I can't find anyone. And these are the men that terrorized her hometown, declaring victory to the Arabs over lifeless bodies. Our investigation with Lighthouse Reports reveals this rare, unseen footage. Evidence of ethnically motivated atrocities against civilians by militiamen, promising to make them suffer. We've identified the victims in this video. 5 brothers dragged out of their home and shot dead in broad daylight. One of them, Abdul Jabbar, was only 14 years old. Captured in a hunt of civilian men from non-Arab tribes.
They take what they want and torture any man they find. That is their goal. They never entered Arab houses in the neighborhood. They only go to the houses of black people, break in and take.
That's our neighbor, she says. He was walking to the well right next to his house. Then they shot and killed him. She says the attack was led by the Rapid Support Forces, the RSF, an Arab tribal militia turned paramilitary group waging a war against Sudan's army.
We woke up to the sound of bullets, lots of bullets. Suddenly the Arabs entered the town and started killing people in the streets.
Safia's husband was an army soldier killed in the battle, but civilian men in her family were targeted too.
My 3 cousins and 2 of my brothers were stood up and shot dead. My father would have been killed too if he hadn't fled.
Residents say they'd never seen anything like it, even compared to the 2003 conflict in Darfur, designated as genocide.
This time, these guys conquer the army and then they come for the civilians. If you have a car, they'll take it. They'll take anything in your home. If you have pretty sisters, they'll rape them.
Thousands of survivors are scattered in these camps, longing to return home and reunite with their families. Relatively safe, but still reeling from the day they were hunted door by door.
Yusra's here with us in the studio. What is the atmosphere like there now? Because you've been 3 times of late.
Yeah, it's incredibly sad. I think people go through such hardship to get out. That flooding, militia checkpoints. We met a pregnant woman who fled heavily pregnant, had to wade through water to get to Chad and got there and couldn't even breastfeed her newborn child because she was just so deprived of food. And the people that we spoke to some of them made that journey across just to speak to us, just to share what they went through and what their town is still going through now under RSF control. And I think when they do that and they speak to me, they ask, is this going to bring justice? And when we arrived to Chad, we found protests happening. The woman you see in the report, discontented, angry, feeling frustrated about the lack of any sort of process to bring about change for them to go back home. The people in these camps don't want to be there. They want to be in their homes. They're farmers, some of them left university, young women who have been out of school now, who don't even have their certificates to apply to study anywhere else. So this is a plea. This report is a plea to the international community to heed their call for some sort of intervention. Last time Darfur went through some similar ethnic violence, we saw the world stand up and speak. We saw
20 years ago.
Exactly. You saw George Clooney. You saw these celebrities use their platform to propel a cause that they felt was about humanity, about everyone coming together. This time, the silence is very loud for people there who feel as though they've been completely neglected.
Okay, a special report online as well, of course. For now, thank you. Well, the commander of the Sudan Armed Forces, actually, I should say that you're doing a Q&A a bit later on, aren't you?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. So that is at 1 o'clock, QR code on your screen right now. If you've got any questions, then let us know.
Bring you up to speed on some of the day's other stories now, shall we? We'll start with the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on NHS workers and patients, which will be examined today as the public inquiry enters a new phase. Evidence this week will come from bereaved family members, as well as Unison, the trade union, who represent many NHS workers. This stage of the inquiry expected to focus on PPE in hospitals and the policy of shielding the most vulnerable. Meanwhile, an anti-corruption charity says it's identified significant concerns in contracts worth over £15 billion awarded by the Conservative government during the pandemic. That's equivalent to £1 in every £3 spent. The analysis from Transparency International found systematic bias and uncontrolled pricing resulted in a vast waste of money.
We've looked at these 5,000 contracts. We've done a lot of the heavy lifting here. We identify 123 contracts worthy of further investigation, amounting to £15 billion of very concerning public spending during the COVID-19 pandemic. So please, government relevant authorities, go away and conduct a forensic audit of all of those contracts to ascertain if there is money that could be clawed back where that's appropriate, or if there are other consequences for those involved if malpractices are found to have occurred.
Public inquiry into the unexplained deaths of thousands of mental health inpatients in Essex begins later today. Retired barrister Baroness Newlove will examine around 2,000 cases spanning over 20 years. It's a major milestone for many families who've waited years for answers. Police are searching for 5 inmates, including a British convict who've escaped a high-security prison in Portugal. Mark Cameron Rossclere had been serving 9 years for kidnap and robbery at the complex north of Lisbon. Authorities say the 5 men had external help from accomplices who used a ladder to help get them out. Venezuela's opposition candidates vow to keep fighting for democracy after being granted asylum in Spain. Edmundo González fled his country after spending weeks in hiding. That's due to an arrest warrant issued by the disputed president, Nicolás Maduro. There's been turmoil in the country since elections in July, as Maduro's victory's not been recognised by the majority of foreign governments, and the opposition claims to have evidence that they, in fact, won the vote. 2 gun salutes will take place today to mark the anniversary of the accession of King Charles. At midday, a 41-gun salute will be fired in Green Park and a 62-gun salute by the Honourable Artillery Company at the Tower of London. Although the King's accession day was officially yesterday, the salutes will take place today as they are not held on Sundays.
Why are you laughing?
Just certain things are sacrosanct, aren't they?
There we go. So Peter Westmacott is with us this morning to talk about Anthony Blinken, who is in town for a couple of days or so. What do you think he'll be talking to our Prime Minister about?
Yeah, he comes in tonight and he'll be here for 24 hours and then I suspect he's on his way somewhere else. I think it's rather an important week, in fact, for the US-UK diplomacy because we had the head of the CIA and the head of SIS doing something together at the weekend. We've got the Prime Minister going to the Oval Office to see President Biden at the end of the week. And we've got the Secretary of State coming in tonight. So lots to talk about. Part of it will be this, if you like, rebuilding of the relationship. I think it's called a strategic dialogue, which they have announced in the White House, which they want to make work with the Brits. But on the substance, I think the big subjects are the obvious one. How do you make progress on Israel-Gaza? What about Russia and Ukraine? And what about the longer-term challenge of China? I suspect those will be the 3 big headline subjects on their agenda.
And what about President Trump? Will he see him while he's there?
You know, normally, before a presidential election, the candidates don't normally like to see foreigners because otherwise it's too easy to say foreigners are interfering. And of course, in the past, Russians and Chinese and Iranians and North Koreans and even Israelis have interfered with domestic election campaigns. So my guess is that the candidates won't. On the other hand, you know, Kamala Harris is still the Vice President of the United States. So if the Prime Minister is going to go and see the President, he might see the Vice President as well. Trump, who knows? But I would be a little surprised.
OK. What's the relationship like between the UK and the US at the moment?
I think it's pretty good, Kay. 8 years ago, at the time of the Brexit referendum, the Americans were saying, this is a daft idea. You won't matter as much in Europe. You won't matter as much to us. Why are you doing it, etc., etc. Time has now passed. The United Kingdom, to coin a phrase from the Prime Minister, is resetting its relationships with Europe. And the United Kingdom remains a very important ally for the United States. We've got a fantastic intelligence relationship. We've got a very good defense relationship. We are doing a lot to help the Ukrainians, which is something which America believes in greatly. We've also supported them when Israel has been under threat. So there's a lot of substance to foreign policy, defense policy, security policy, and, if you like, the culture of the 2 English-speaking nations, which is important. And it seems to me that the relationship is strong. If you ask me what will it be like after Donald Trump comes back, if he does come back, it'll be different. But at the moment, it seems to me that it's in good shape.
OK. But we still don't have this post-Brexit trade partnership that we have been talking about. Where are we going with that? Could these this week bring that any closer?
It was never going to happen. This was something that Donald Trump chucked out as being a nice, shiny reward for Brexit because he was pro-Brexit, even though he didn't make Theresa May's life at all easy with some of his public remarks about how to make Brexit work. It was always going to be a very long shot because we have a very substantial trading and investment relationship with America now. If you try to have a bilateral special comprehensive free trade agreement, we will have to give stuff we don't want to give on agriculture and financial services and a number of other things. The Americans would have to give stuff on their protectionist legislation, Buy America laws and so on. It would be really hard, and I think that we don't really need it, and I think there's been a lot of talk about something that, to be really honest, is never going to happen.
I'm just really intrigued why he's going again so soon to see President Biden, when President Biden definitely won't be in office, and the Democrats may not be in office come November.
The last visit was, of course, for the NATO summit in July,
Yeah.
and that was a bit of a bun fight, you know, not very much bilateral attention. President Biden is still the President of the United States and will be until January, not just until November.
Yeah.
There's an awful lot of important stuff going on in the world where we and the Americans, I think, need to talk to each other. The two heads of the intelligence agencies at the weekend said that the world was faced by threats which are unknown in their severity since the Second World War. There's a lot to talk about. So I think clearly the Oval Office, the White House were happy to make this meeting happen. It's good for the Prime Minister to build the relationships with the other leading heads of government around the world. And I don't think there'll be any shortage of important things to talk about.
OK, it's good to see you. Thanks very much indeed. Thank you. Still to come on The Breakfast Show for you here on Sky News Monday morning. What are the latest happenings at Westminster? Sam and Jack will be here in just a few moments' time. Also ahead, the changing of the guard at Edinburgh Castle as Alistair Bruce steps away from his role as governor. And live in Paris, reflecting on a successful summer for Paralympics GB.
I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
Wall Street! High Street!
Well, the plan seems to be to head to the police station where the policeman who fired the shots was based.
And everything, his memories is all gone.
In almost every corner, this town has been completely destroyed by the fire. I've witnessed the remarkable passion for politics here, but the anger too.
We have to get Trump out of the White House.
Is this the moment to reform gun laws?
It's easy to go to politics.
But it's important. It's at the heart of the issue.
I get that that's where the media likes to go.
No, it's not. It's where many of the people we've talked to here like to go.
I report on the biggest stories from around the world. This is a town that is effectively encircled by the Russians.
You say it's all fabrication, what's happening in Bucha?
Destroyed my nation.
We take you to the heart of stories that shape our planet. Yeah, I can hear now quite a few explosions in the distance here in Jerusalem. A very violent series of confrontations here. What do you think of ISIS?
Everybody here knows the truth of ISIS.
They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Why only in America?
People want their country to work.
They want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.
Hello again, everybody. Welcome back to The Breakfast Show here on Sky News. In a moment, we're going to be speaking to Jack and Sam. He's on his way over Westminster Bridge. He's going to get on one of those line bikes and he's going to be here as soon as he can. Did he oversleep?
No, this is real life. I saw him on the podcast at 6:30 this morning, but, sometimes life intervenes and we get a little delayed.
OK. Well, it might be a lot of you if he's not here shortly.
I'm the best bit. I'm the best bit.
We think so. Don't tell him. Top stories?
I'll bring you extensive top stories this morning. Thousands of victims of antisocial behaviour say they're not being listened to by authorities. Sky News has had a first look at a landmark report into the scale of the problem. A joint investigation by Sky News and Lighthouse Reports has uncovered evidence of an ethnically motivated massacre in Sudan. Meanwhile, Great Ormond Street Hospital has apologised to families and launched an urgent review into more than 700 cases as the work of a former consultant at the hospital is being investigated. And pressure is mounting on the Prime Minister as dozens of Labour MPs are reportedly refusing to support the government's proposal to cut the winter fuel allowance to pensioners in a Commons vote tomorrow.
And breathe. You OK?
Never better.
Did you doubt it, Kate?
No, not for 1 second. Not for 1 second. What's the top of the shop in the podcast today?
We're talking the winter fuel rebellion. One of the reasons, a little bit late, not really late, is there's been a bit of a kerfuffle in the last, I don't know, 30 minutes or so. There's been a minister out on some of the airwaves suggesting that there just could be a little bit of softening about this, a little bit of additional help for those pensioners, those over 1 million pensioners who will be below the poverty line after this change. And it looks like she's got it wrong. I think the Treasury have swooped in to...
I think she said that to us, actually.
She did. On the planes, trains, automobiles and bikes, I haven't seen everything.
Yeah.
But I think the word is from the Treasury, you're getting that wrong. And they're very clear, there will be no U-turn and there will be no additional cash to help the predicament of those who lose out, but at that point remain below the poverty line. And I think that the way that this minister has been dealt with, Diane Johnson, who's sitting here not that long ago, is the kind of iron fist on a day that the government would prefer to be going softly with its backbenchers up to 50 rebels, most of whom would probably abstain or vote with the government rather than cause deep embarrassment. But in the end, this is a spending choice and a binary issue. You either support this or you don't. And I think what we've seen in the last 90 minutes is the government being quite clear they're sticking to their guns.
I'm not sure it is going to be a binary issue. So the context is there's going to be a vote on this tomorrow, as your viewers might know, in the House of Commons, and Keir Starmer's going to win. He's got a massive majority and he can do whatever he wants in Parliament, but there's going to be a vote on this cut to winter fuel payments for now, exactly. But there are some Labour MPs who are talking about not so much voting against it, but just staying away, just finding something else to do tomorrow and not making it. And they think that they'll certainly get in trouble with the party if they abstain in that way, but they don't think they'll get the whip suspended and some of the very heavy-handed treatment we've seen in the past from people who voted against. And so I think the game tomorrow, for those of us who watch this stuff in Westminster, is how many Labour MPs are just not prepared to vote for this measure. They're so worried about the pensioners in their constituency, they're so worried about the message that it sends to the country that one of the first big things that Labour have done in power is actually cut benefits for elderly people, that they're not prepared to put their name to it.
And the TUC boss on the show this morning said, you need to think again, you can't do this.
Yeah, his language was fascinating. He sort of said it's right that she thinks again, almost as if he knows that she is. I'm not, as I was saying, I'm not sure that she is. You've got the head of the TUC, you've got the head of Unite saying that, don't pick the pockets of pensioners, is what Sharon Graham told our John Craig yesterday. You've got the PCS union, which actually isn't one of those Labour-affiliated unions, also saying the same. Are these voices that Rachel Reeves will feel that she has to listen to right now? I'm not sure. There's a lot in the negotiation between the government and the unions right now. There's a lot that the unions want, potentially even more, that directly relates to their members, people who pay subscriptions to unions. So that, I think, will be a bigger priority. So the unions sounding off, but perhaps it isn't quite the top of their priority list.
Why pick this one? Why pick taking money off pensioners? I mean, it was always going to be volatile.
Well, it won't be the only thing they pick, Kay. You know, when we see the budget at the end of October, there's going to be lots of pain for lots of different groups in society because, according to the Chancellor, there are big holes in the national budget that need to be filled somehow, and the money's got to come from somewhere. There are people in the Labour Party who think that it is not fair that at a time of massive constraint, this winter fuel payment goes to every pensioner, even the richest ones in society. So that's the sort of thinking behind it. Wherever you make cuts, you're going to upset groups of people. You know, wherever you do it, and we'll see it, as say it next month, there'll be others who are upset as well.
As Trevor was saying yesterday, 20 billion sounds like a lot of money, but in the whole round of government spending, it's not that much money.
It isn't. Remember the cuts that George Osborne did, that people still talk about as being the sort of high watermark of austerity. When he embarked on those, he was asking for 40 billion over 4 years. Rachel Reeves is trying to find 22 billion, or 17 billion now that she's actually made some cuts, within 1 year. So, yes, you're right, within the trillions that a government would spend and borrow, it's a rounding error. But within the kind of day-to-day budgets and constraints that Whitehall has to operate in, it does actually matter, and these cuts will make a material difference, different departments tell me, because most of the spending goes on welfare issues, social security and other things that...
Biggest budget spend.
Yeah.
There is, of course, the second round of the Tory leadership race. Is that tomorrow or today?
The second round of voting is tomorrow on Tuesday, but what's happening today is the 5 remaining contenders are all filing into a room in Parliament this afternoon to do a hustings event with the Tory MPs, because, of course, at this stage...
Don't need a very big room today.
They don't need a very big room anymore, bless them. It's still the Tory MPs who are deciding at this point. It hasn't gone out to the grassroots members. They're going to keep whittling it down, and we'll see that again tomorrow. The race is getting a bit nasty now, Kay. When it started, there was all very kid gloves. We were all friends. Unity was the message. We need to learn from our election disaster. Now there's a lot of briefing in the papers, rival camps sniping at each other, pointing fingers at each other, accusing each other of dirty tricks and skullduggery.
Bobby J baseball caps I've heard about.
Well, all that kind of thing. And so I think when they all go in that room this afternoon for the Tory MPs to ask questions of them, I think the atmosphere will be a little more tense than maybe it was a couple of weeks ago.
If it looks and feels a bit like a game show, I mean, it's got all the hallmarks of Celebrity Brother without the celebrities. I mean, they all have to make their kind of address in the diary room to MPs tonight. There's briefing against the different candidates. Then one of them gets evicted from the competition tomorrow. In the end, the public at home, if you're a Tory member, will get a vote. And I think it's got the sort of facets of a game show and some of the sort of comedy. I mean, I don't take too seriously the accusations of skullduggery. There are rules, they are being followed, and MPs can ask other people to vote on their behalf. That's this system of proxies. That's allowing these claims that votes are being distributed, you know, not in favour of who people want to vote for, but to stop other candidates from getting on the final ballot. That's just part of the system they've all chosen to take part in.
Priti Patel's votes are going to go where?
Hard to say. I mean, that's been the scramble over the weekend. These poor Tory MPs who aren't taking part in the leadership contest getting bombarded with phone calls, and particularly the half a dozen or so, a bit more, that voted for, dozen or so who voted for Priti Patel, because she's now out of the contest and they have to vote for somebody else tomorrow. So everybody wants their votes. I don't really know how they're going to split. It's so close, Kay. If you look at the numbers last time at the bottom end of the contest, there was tiny numbers of votes between them. So it really could come down to one MP changing their mind at the last minute or getting wooed at the last minute could suddenly knock someone unexpectedly out of the contest.
Mel Stride going to survive?
Mel Stride and Tom Tugendhat are have one vote between them.
Yeah.
I think it's a mug's game to predict at this stage.
Do you?
I have no idea who's going to go out, and I have no idea who's going to win.
The assumption is still that Mel Stride is the least likely person in this contest to win. He's still got the no. Well, exactly. He surprised us. So it sounds as a mug game, but it's still probably, if you had to put money on it, he would be the most likely person to go out. He's got the lowest profile. There aren't really Tory MPs, even his supporters, who really think he's going to win this, and so probably it'll be him. But goodness knows.
What else is in the podcast? Daily podcast.
Well, it's a big week for UK-US relations. You've got Antony Blinken, the US Secretary of State, arriving overnight, big day of talks tomorrow, and then Keir Starmer goes to the White House on Friday to see Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, who's going to pop in to their chat. It's actually global issues that are in the frame there. They've got a lot to discuss about the Middle East, but particularly Ukraine. How is that conflict going? Is there any glimmer of hope, or is it going to end up maybe next year in some kind of settlement? I know there are people inside government who fear that's ultimately what's going to happen. Can it be on Zelensky's terms as far as possible? I think that's the kind of things that...
Post-Brexit trade deal that we heard so much about?
Well, I think that's not going to happen this week. As anything with Brexit, it's going to be a tediously long and slow process. But Keir Starmer has put a lot of capital into this already, spent a lot of time going around Europe, meeting up with key European leaders. We saw him in Dublin on Saturday with the Taoiseach, Simon Harris. There will be other visits to European capitals in the weeks ahead. He is trying to lay the ground for a new relationship, and ultimately, yes, that's going to mean some sort of new deal, but goodness knows how long it's going to take to agree it. As with everything in Brexit, it could be years away.
Years and years.
What a treat for us all to look forward to.
Daily podcast. Scan the QR code at the bottom of your screen there, and it's everything you need to know in Westminster in less than 20 minutes. It's good to see you, boys. Thank you.
Cheers.
Let's bring in Rob Harris, should we? He is in Paris for us. End of the Paralympic Games, drawn to a close. The torch handed over to LA. How was it? Morning.
Good morning. It's the end of the 6-week party here in Paris after the Olympics and Paralympics. The curtain was brought down on a spectacular summer of sport, and it was the night that the Stade de France was turned into a Parisian nightclub with athletes filling the floor. What was the track where medals were won becoming this huge dance floor with a load of electro dance anthems being played as the closing ceremony took place. There were boos, actually, for the French President Emmanuel Macron, reflecting some of the political instability that's been the backdrop of these Olympics and Paralympics. But there was a far better atmosphere for the President of the International Paralympic Committee, who was using his speech to deliver some big, broader messages, talking about how words of praise for these Paralympians must be replaced by words of conviction to break down barriers. And these first Paralympics ever in Paris have given a huge platform for disability sport, a platform that is not often gained throughout the rest of the year. And that's why Paralympics GB have been using these games to try to call for more access to disability sport in schools, and it's those stars of the GB Paralympics team who've been at the forefront, and particularly the flag bearers last night, who were Poppy Maskell, who contributed most of the team with 5 medals, as well as a first-time Taekwondo gold medalist, Matt Bush. And this is all as Paralympics GB finished second on the medal count for a 3rd consecutive games with 124 medals. The final ones were won in kayaking yesterday, with Laura Sugar and Charlotte Henshaw getting the 2 final gold medals. The 49 golds won by Paralympics GB. They won medals in 18 of the 19 sports they competed in. But now the challenge, not only for Paralympics GB, but also the Team GB Olympians, is ensuring that they still get all that funding from the government as the spending reviews taking place to ensure that they can sustain this success, because they're saying how funding Olympic and Paralympic sport has a knock-on effect for wider society, the health of the nation, and of course the joy of the nation after all these medal triumphs over the summer.
OK, enough fun for you now. Come home.
Sorry, just reached there.
It's OK, don't worry. He's gone native, hasn't he? Still to come on The Breakfast Show for you this morning. We crossed to Alistair Bruce for the last time outside Edinburgh Castle as its governor.
I'm Katie Spencer and I'm Sky News' arts and entertainment correspondent. When you think of Glastonbury, it's mud you want and music. They're going to cross to us live in a minute. Okay. Thank you so much. Brad Pitt is now a prolific producer behind the scenes.
It's not a mystery to me. We always were capable of doing this.
Oh, they're wonderful children as an audience.
Who did that? Maverick here on the red carpet. I'm so excited, Tom Cruise. This is the story of the night.
It's the little independent film that could.
We take you to the heart of the stories that shape our world.
Nor have I ever struck any woman in my life.
There's this illusion of power.
Are you feeling well?
I remember covering the Oscars and that now infamous moment, the Will Smith slap. Nobody could quite believe that it happened. You can tell from these crowds just how excited people are for the return of Pride.
These actors playing the lead roles were born long after the Sex Pistols broke up.
Are you pleased that you did say yes to the job?
I've never regretted it.
As a team, we've interviewed some of the biggest stars in the world. It can be incredibly surreal being swept up in their world, but we try to give you an honest sense of how these people really are.
Okay, I'll talk to you.
Don't leave me.
Yeah, okay.
There's no easy goodies. There's no easy baddies.
I've had a great time here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Play Sky News.
From the Sky News Centre at 7.
Now that you're up to date, we can go into a bit more detail.
Things can change incredibly quickly.
Taken by surprise.
Have you ever known a moment like this in British politics before? Yes. Cheers.
We'll start with breaking news.
Let's get the latest on the ground.
So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better.
I'm Greg Milam, and I'm Sky's chief North of England correspondent. I've reported from around the world and around the UK.
I'm Mark Stone, I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Washington, DC. And beyond the United States, from across the world, I report on the biggest stories.
I'm Stuart Ramsey and I'm Sky's chief correspondent.
I'm David Blevins, and I'm Sky's Senior Ireland Correspondent.
Hello again, everybody. Welcome back to The Breakfast Show for you here on Sky News Monday morning. Our royal commentator, Alistair Bruce, is stepping down from his role as Governor of Edinburgh Castle after 5 years today. He's taking on an exciting new role. He's with us. Hello to you, Alistair. Always fabulous to see you. Tell me what your new role is, first of all, and then we'll reflect on your old one.
Well, what I'm going to hope to do is I'm putting myself in the election to be the Chancellor of Oxford University. I have no idea what luck I'll have, but it'd be a wonderful thing to do after representing this amazing institution here in Scotland for 5.5 years.
Tell me about the castle and what it was like living there, working there.
I've loved living here. It's got a real atmosphere, and every night I walk around the walls and look out at the wonders of Edinburgh and feel the heart and soul of this amazing city. But my role as governor has been to represent the Scottish soldier and the continuing traditions that represents, because Scotland has a very particular way of marking its martial tradition, and the sense here is that the castle is its foundation stone. So keeping traditions going, like today we'll fire a gun salute of 21 guns to mark the King's accession.
Have you hosted the King there?
No, well, I've not hosted him so much as I've given him the keys of the castle. So the King came, and monarchs are always at liberty to turn up at castles in Scotland and demand the keys. It's sort of part of the sovereign rights of Scotland to hold authorities from the King. So he very sweetly gives it back. So I offered him up the key, and I had to say certain words, and he returned that. And this always happens at the beginning of every reign, and has done since 1822, when George IV first came. And I was really lucky also, Kay, that 200 years on from that first presentation of the key in modern times, Elizabeth II received the key from me down at Holyrood Palace, marking again that tradition, which is unique to Scottish castles, and it keeps it going. And it was a great honour to present it to her just before the end of her reign, and then to the new king at the beginning of his.
What does a key to a castle look like?
Well, actually it doesn't open anything, but it's a silver key. It's quite vulnerable in the sense that they take great care of it because it was made back in 1822. See, a monarch hadn't visited Scotland for nearly 200 years before that, so they recreated it. But the key, as I say, doesn't open anything. But there are plenty of keys there. In fact, I'm going to have to hand over to Major General Bob Bruce, my successor. You see, we keep it in the family. I'm going to have to hand over to him all the keys that I've got. I'm going to have to hand over all the keys that I've got in various boxes and things to open really quite a lot of doors and safes and things that I've had entrusted to me for 5.5 years.
What have the highlights been?
I think undoubtedly the highlight has been when I had the opportunity to mark each time there was a moment of remembrance the 4 soldiers that I'd had the privilege of training for the Falklands War, who are remembered here in the Scottish National War Memorial. And I know that may seem strange, but it's a long time ago, 1982, but the privilege of training soldiers for war and then not bringing them all home is something that you carry quite heavily as a soldier. And I think that this place has been a treasure from that point of view. And the Scots built this amazing war memorial at the heart of the castle, on the highest point of the rock. And every time I'm there, it's been very moving. And also every year we've marked the anniversary of the invasion of Ukraine, with Ukrainians who live now in this part of Scotland, really all gathering inside the castle to mark their own extraordinarily powerful and contemporary concerns.
I believe that today is the last day of your army career after 46 years. Congratulations. I'm sure there have been highlights and times that you've had to reflect on the challenges that you've faced. What do you do next? How do you fill that chasm that will be left behind?
Well, I absolutely love working for Sky News, and I will continue doing that, I hope. But I won't have to keep finding time to do my duties as a reservist. And actually, all reservists have to play this balance between their full-time job and doing their military duty. But I shall miss it hugely. I shall weep, I'm sure, as I leave the castle. My flag will be taken down later today. And I look back to my very first day when I joined the army and how long ago that seems. But all the time through, I've had the privilege of meeting and working with the most amazing people in the armed forces. I will miss them. I will go on trying to represent them well. But I shall reflect with immense joy the privilege of ending my career here as His Majesty's Governor of Edinburgh Castle, because, to be honest, I mean, look at it. Isn't she looking bonny today? And I just can't believe that for 5.5 years I've had the privilege of living there.
You're looking pretty bonny yourself. It's good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed, Alistair, as always. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. Thanks.
What a great workplace as well for 5 years, hey?
Can you imagine walking
Just
around the ramparts
stunning.
every evening just to look out to the city?
It might be my favourite UK city, actually, Edinburgh.
What?
It might be my favourite UK city.
Beautiful. I used to live in Edinburgh.
Yeah? Is it your favourite as well?
Not my favourite, but it's pretty
It's gotta be
special.
London.
I love London.
Manchester.
London for me.
Liverpool. Leeds.
Wigan.
Wigan's not a city.
Oh, sore point.
It is quite a sore point, as you mention it. We don't have a cathedral. Liverpool has two, one to spare. We could have had it. That's about it from us for this hour. Coming up in the next hour here on Sky News, we've had a minister on the programme today who appears to have misspoken when she was talking to us about pensioners and whether or not they were going to get the winter fuel payment. 10 million of them will not. Some of them will then find themselves in poverty as a result. A lot of Labour MPs very upset about that. Well, I'm not going to tell you what she said. What you need to do is tune in the next few moments and we'll tell you exactly what's happening. You'll be here, Sam will be here, you'll be here. We'll see you in a sec.
I say, bring it on.
With America divided and tensions running high, get ready for an election like no other.
Join our teams as we follow the campaign trail as America decides.
We will win, win, win.
Get closer to the action this US election with full reaction and analysis.
Sky News, the full story first.
Good morning, everybody. It's 9 o'clock. Coming up on today's programme for you, the Treasury slaps down a suggestion from the Home Office Minister, Diana Johnson, after she suggests there could be more wriggle room to help pensioners.
The Prime Minister is under growing pressure over Tuesday's vote to cut winter fuel payments for 10 million elderly people.
And should people be charged per mile for driving? That's our debate coming up at 9:30.
It's Monday, the 9th of September. The Prime Minister has insisted that pensioners don't need winter fuel payments as ministers defend a tough decision.
I'm not pretending this isn't hard, but it is one of the tough decisions that we are going to have to take to get the finances back on track.
Hello, I've just phoned and asked for fire brigades and police. We've just realised that whatever's on fire looks like a motorbike.
Lives blighted by antisocial behaviour, but 2/3 of complaints are ignored or unresolved. Also ahead, Sky News uncovers evidence of an ethnically motivated massacre in Sudan. The COVID inquiry resumes today and we'll look at the impact of COVID on the NHS. Paris says farewell to the Paralympics and a glorious summer of sport with a spectacular fireworks display. Morning, the government has been accused of deciding to pick the pocket of pensioners as pressure mounts for Sir Keir Starmer to U-turn on means-tested winter fuel payments. Speaking to Sky News, the policing minister alluded to there being more help for pensioners to pay for heating, but the government has denied it will change its stance.
I think it's a really tough decision. Nobody wants to make this.
But you think it's the right thing to do?
I think in government, one of the things you have to do is make tough decisions. And unfortunately, this is one of the first ones that we're having to deal with. But we know that we are also committed to the triple lock on pensions, and we've got the budget coming up in October. So I think all the options are being looked at by government as to how to make sure the poorest and most vulnerable do not suffer.
Slapped down on that, wasn't she?
It didn't take long. All the options are being looked at. No, they're not, say the Treasury this morning. There is a revolt heading Keir Starmer's way. Potentially up to 50 Labour MPs are uncomfortable with this decision to take away the winter fuel allowance from maybe 10 million pensioners. More than 1 million pensioners expected to be below the poverty line after this change is introduced. And there's a crunch vote tomorrow. But the question is, what are the conversations going on behind the scenes? Is there any sign that the Treasury might bend? Of course, taking away this winter fuel allowance from most pensioners, apart from the very poorest, will give them somewhere in the region of £1.3, £1.4 billion. Now, Diana Johnson, in the last couple of hours, appeared to lead into the suggestion that the Treasury were listening, and while they might do a full U-turn, they could throw some public money at softening what's essentially going to be a cliff edge for those pensioners who fall just above the threshold that you can still claim winter fuel allowance from. But the Treasury say no. The whole point of this measure is to save money that they say is needed to fill the government's the black hole left behind by the last government of £22 billion. And what's more, there are more difficult decisions to come on October the 30th in the budget. So there will be no rowing back, no U-turning, no softening, and no more public money. So a blunt message there that's rather in keeping with what we heard from Keir Starmer yesterday, but it's not what Labour MPs want to hear.
OK, and a busy week for the Prime Minister while we're on the subject.
That's right. Right now, he's got a knife crime summit. Idris Elba, the actor, is alongside him for that. Cabinet's later this morning. We've got that big vote tomorrow, potentially a big speech on growth from Rachel Reeves. And then on Friday, he's off to the White House, Keir Starmer is, for a meeting there with Joe Biden.
I was in a movie with Idris Elba.
I didn't know that.
I know. You believe me, though, don't you? I
would never dare do anything else.
It was called 100 Streets. Look it up.
What are the reviews?
They weren't great.
I'll go and look it up, definitely.
OK, thank you. Now, thousands of victims of antisocial behaviour say they're being let down and left living in fear. Sky News has had first sight of a landmark report from England and Wales's Victim Commissioner, which reveals that more than 2/3 of people who have reported antisocial behaviour haven't had their complaints resolved. We'll get more from Nick Martin in just a moment, but first, here's his report.
Oh, my God. Yeah, I've just phoned the police and the fire brigade.
So it was a gang of boys dumped a bike?
It's a gang of boys have dumped a bike. They've created a fire.
This is the terrifying moment a motorbike is set on fire just yards from a family's back garden.
My house backs onto the Wilmot Park and it's been set alight in front of the gates and there's black smoke billowing in the air.
This is one of a million reported cases of antisocial behaviour each year, blighting communities across Britain. Paul filmed that incident. He says he's been reporting antisocial behaviour for years and thinks very little has been done to help him and his neighbours.
I've been trying since we moved in here in 2016 to try and get the council to pay attention to this. It massively gives us huge amounts of anxiety and stress, lack of sleep.
Now a major new report into antisocial behaviour reveals that thousands of victims, like Paul, aren't getting enough help. The Victims Commissioner for England and Wales found that 2/3 of people who reported antisocial behaviour said their problems hadn't been resolved. Half said the problems had been ongoing for 5 years or more. The majority, more than 60%, reported it to multiple agencies like police, councils and housing associations. And a staggering 70% said they received no support at all. Labour says tackling antisocial behaviour is one of its key priorities. Dame Diana Johnson is the new policing minister.
What are you going to do to try and clear up when someone rings up and something's happening in their street? The fobbing off of it's a council thing, it's a police thing. That is a government thing. That is going to be something that you have to figure out.
Absolutely, and I recognise that.
What are you going to do?
I recognise that as a constituency MP because I've had constituents say to me, I've rung the council or I've rung the police, nobody comes, nothing's done. So I think it is about recognising we need to get much better at this joined-up approach to dealing with what's going on in communities and tackling the individuals who are causing the problems to families.
Kent Police told us that they are aware of local concerns and is working with Dartford Council to address these issues. They said they attended within hours of the motorbike incident but haven't caught those responsible, adding, "We have teams who regularly patrol the area and also have a dedicated beat officer who residents can talk to directly." Dartford Council said they had stepped up patrols here, urging residents to report incidents to police.
It obviously makes you want to move. It doesn't make you want to live here anymore.
We did ask the Minister about it this morning. Didn't get much further when it came to the difference between the respect order and the ASBO.
That's right. And remember, Labour pretty much coined the phrase antisocial behaviour back in the late 90s. Tony Blair made it a big priority. Tough on crime, tough on the causes of crime. Many viewers might remember that. And they brought in antisocial behaviours, which were criminal sanctions on people who persistently badly behave in communities. And that's all in the dim and distant past now, but what Labour are talking about now is respect orders. So we did want to know what respect orders are, break it down for us, what do they mean? And the detail is still quite light on that. Labour would rather say, look at the last 14 years of Conservative coalition governments and look at the failures there. But I think what this story highlights is that thousands of people are talking about it, reporting antisocial behaviour, but 70% say that it's not being resolved. And I think that's a failure of policing, and local policing in particular, perhaps cuts over the last few years, but also councils struggling to deal with these incidents. And what the Victims Commissioner is saying is that residents can no longer expect to be their own detective. They need a single point of contact, report their antisocial behaviour, and hopefully expect it to be resolved.
Thank you. Your report is extended versions of it, aren't there, throughout the day here on Sky News, also online. Thank you. Top stories?
Yes, let's bring some of today's other news now. We'll start, shall we, with an anti-corruption charity that says it's identified significant concerns in contracts worth over £15 billion awarded by the Conservative government during the course of the pandemic. That's equivalent to £1 in every £3 spent. The analysis from Transparency International found systematic bias and uncontrolled spending resulted in a vast waste of public money.
We've looked at these 5,000 contracts. We've done a lot of the heavy lifting here. We identify 123 contracts worthy of further investigation, amounting to £15 billion of very concerning public spending during the COVID-19 pandemic. So please, government, relevant authorities, go away and conduct a forensic audit of all of those contracts to ascertain if there is money that could be clawed back where that's appropriate, or if there are other consequences for those involved if malpractices are found to have occurred.
A public inquiry into the unexplained deaths of thousands of mental health inpatients in Essex begins later today. Retired barrister Baroness Newlove will examine around 2,000 cases spanning over the course of 20 years. It's a major milestone for many families who've waited years for answers. Police are searching for 5 inmates, including a British convict who've escaped a high-security prison in Portugal. Mark Cameron Rossclere had been serving 9 years for kidnap and robbery at a complex north of Lisbon. Authorities say the 5 men had external help from accomplices who used a ladder to help get them out. Venezuela's opposition candidates vow to keep fighting for democracy. That's after being granted asylum in Spain. Edmundo Gonzalez fled his country after spending weeks in hiding due to an arrest warrant issued by the disputed president Nicolas Maduro. There's been turmoil in the country since elections in July as Maduro's victories not been recognised by the majority of foreign governments, and the opposition claims to have evidence that they, in fact, won the vote. In Edinburgh, a man is due in court today charged in connection with the death of mum of 3, Kasia Smith. Kasia was last seen on FaceTime 11 months ago. Police believe she's no longer alive, although a body has never been found.
Let's tell you about a joint investigation between Sky News and Lighthouse Reports. It's uncovered evidence of an ethnically motivated massacre in Sudan, which you've been covering for us. A war broke out between government forces and militia groups in the capital Khartoum last year. The rebels, known as Rapid Support Forces, originated as an Arab tribal militia in the Darfur region. The area has a long history of ethnic conflict, culminating in the 2003 genocide. In June of last year, the rebel forces made one of their first major gains, taking the garrison in Khartoum. What followed in the town and the nearby displacement camp in Kassab was a massacre. Many of the survivors fled to camps on the border of North Darfur and eastern Chad, from where Yusra had this report.
These are the women demanding answers, forced out of their homes by militias in a national war devastating Sudan that echoes the Darfur genocide of 20 years ago. My 13-year-old daughter is still missing since the day we fled, she says. I've no mother, no brother. I can't find anyone. And these are the men that terrorized her hometown, declaring victory to the Arabs over lifeless bodies. Our investigation with Lighthouse Reports reveals this rare, unseen footage. Evidence of ethnically motivated atrocities against civilians by militiamen, promising to make them suffer. We've identified the victims in this video. 5 brothers dragged out of their home and shot dead in broad daylight. One of them, Abdul Jabbar, was only 14 years old. Captured in a hunt of civilian men from non-Arab tribes.
They take what they want and torture any man they find. That is their goal. They never entered Arab houses in the neighborhood. They only go to the houses of black people, break in and take.
That's our neighbor, she says. He was walking to the well right next to his house. Then they shot and killed him. She says the attack was led by the Rapid Support Forces, the RSF, an Arab tribal militia turned paramilitary group waging a war against Sudan's army.
We woke up to the sound of bullets, lots of bullets. Suddenly the Arabs entered the town and started killing people in the streets.
Safia's husband was an army soldier killed in the battle, but civilian men in her family were targeted too.
My 3 cousins and 2 of my brothers were stood up and shot dead. My father would have been killed too if he hadn't fled.
Residents say they'd never seen anything like it, even compared to the 2003 conflict in Darfur, designated as genocide.
This time, these guys conquer the army, and then they come for the civilians. If you have a car, they'll take it. They'll take anything in your home. If you have pretty sisters, they'll rape them.
Thousands of survivors are scattered in these camps, longing to return home and reunite with their families. Relatively safe, but still reeling from the day they were hunted door by door.
So much despair.
A lot of despair, and this crisis is being called the forgotten war. But I think it's more accurate to call it the ignored war, because we have this evidence consistently being shown that these crimes are being carried out against unarmed civilians. We got very close to those brothers that you see in the report. We managed to find out that they even were in Khartoum, the capital, just 5 days before the attack. They really had nothing to do with the tension that was building in the days before the army garrison was taken and the massacre started. So the kind of brazenness of this violence, how unforgiving it is, the fact that they're going into people's homes and attacking them based on the color of their skin, based on their tribes, based on things that are completely out of their control, is horrific. 20 years ago, we saw a conflict, ethnically motivated, designated as a genocide in Darfur, and there was outrage. People were rightfully, disgusted by the violence that was happening there. But these residents have told us that this time around, things are even more devastating. Families that endured that conflict in 2003 and stayed on their land and stayed in their homes have had to flee to the camps that we went to. Millions of people, okay? This is the largest displacement crisis in the world, and Sudan is a corridor country to Europe. So this will be felt in the months and the years to come.
And we've got a question and answer session with you a little bit later on, haven't we? 1 o'clock here on Sky News. If you do have a question for Yusra, then just use the QR code on the screen right now, and she will do her best to help answer that at 1 o'clock today. So the QR code, just scan that, or you can go onto our website as well and chat to Yusra a bit later on. For now, thank you.
Thank you.
Quick look at the weather for you here on Sky News Monday morning. Drier for most, but turning colder and windier tomorrow. Widespread blustery showers, some longer spells of rain. Northern and western parts are fairly clear and chilly. Early fog beginning to lift, while northern, central and eastern England are mild but cloudy with a little patchy rain. Northern and central England will brighten this morning. Paris 2024 Paralympic Games has drawn to a close. And it's been an incredibly successful Games for Paralympics GB, with a total of 124 medals, including 49 golds. Our sports correspondent Rob Harris has this report.
This was just what France and the world needed. Distraction from all the discord. Pessimism in Paris replaced with pride. The feel-good summer of sport ending with one final night of Paralympic partying.
Inspired by sport, I ask you all to be inspired with your commitment to change. Appreciation and applause must be followed by acceptance and action.
The flag bearers. Swimmer Poppy Maskell, who contributed most to the team, 3 golds and 2 silvers. And Matt Bush, leaving a taekwondo gold medalist after missing the last 2 games through injury. The final day beginning with 4 final medals added to the GB tally. In kayaking, titles were defended in their disability classes by Laura Sugar and Charlotte Henshaw, with Emma Wiggs replicating their GB 1-2 from Tokyo. While in the canoe sprint, there was debut silver for Jack Ayres after the pain of not making the squad last time. The last of 124 Paralympics GB medals. Finishing second again behind China in the table, thanks to almost £70 million from the lottery and government. The hope now that funding is not cut in the new Labour government spending review.
Investment in Olympic and Paralympic sport has to be worth it. I mean, it's about health and well-being. It creates that sense of identity and national pride. It's a real feel-good factor, and that's down to the hard work of the athletes and the support teams. And it's those performances on the field of play that ignites the imagination.
The message from Hannah Cockcroft, now a 9-time Paralympic champion. Consider how spending on sport can make society healthier and more inclusive.
As British athletes, we're so incredibly lucky to get equal support for both our Olympic athletes and our Paralympic athletes. I think that shows with our medal tally and how successful we are here as a team. But I think, It is so important. Every other country looks up to us for that.
Britain's Paralympians and Olympians have shown that spending on talent translates into places on the podium. But is it worth it, and how to assess it? Questions that will be asked in France. Billions have been spent staging these games, even without the need to build an array of new venues. And Paris can bask in providing a wondrous summer of sport. The flame now extinguished. The Paralympics ending as the Olympics began 6 weeks ago in a downpour. But a games that set the benchmark for the Americans to match. Send bright stars. With 4 years until it's LA's turn. Rob Harris, Sky News, Paris.
Still to come on The Breakfast Show for you here on Sky News. Is weekend lying good for your health? We'll speak to a sleep expert.
We're going to evict crazy Kamala.
Donald Trump is an unserious man.
The most incompetent.
I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
Wall Street! Wall Street!
Well, the plan seems to be to head to the police station where the policeman who fired the shots was based.
And everything you know, his memories is all gone.
In almost every corner, this town has been completely destroyed by the fire. I've witnessed the remarkable passion for politics here, but the anger too.
We have to get Trump out of the White House.
Is this the moment to reform gun laws?
You know, it's easy to go to politics.
But it's important. It's at the heart of the issue.
I get that that's where the media likes to go.
It's not. It's where many of the people we've talked to here like to go. I report on the biggest stories from around the world. This is a town that is effectively encircled by the Russians. You say it's all fabrication, what's happening in Bucha?
Destroyed my nation.
We take you to the heart of stories that shape our planet. I can hear now quite a few explosions in the distance here in Jerusalem. A very violent series of confrontations here. What do you think of ISIS?
Everybody here knows the truth of ISIS.
They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Tanks, heavy vehicle.
Why only in America?
People want their country to work.
You want to jump in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.
Again, you're watching The Breakfast Show here on Sky News. Now, are you a fan of a lie-in at the weekend? Is it a good idea for your health? Let's talk about it with Dr. Narina Ramkakhan. Hi. It's good to see you.
Good morning,
Thanks
Kay.
for joining us. We've just been comparing our Aura rings.
We have.
And you had 94% sleep last night, you said.
Well, yeah, I got a 94% score. I mean, I slept really well. I should do. I'm a sleep expert.
Yeah, mine's 59. That's not so
We
good.
need to work on it.
Can you have a lie-in at the weekend and then it just you can use that for the rest of the week?
Well, you know, this is a really interesting observation that they've made as a result of this big study, a huge chunk of data, over 90,000 people. And they're calling it compensatory weekend sleep, weekend compensatory sleep. And To some degree, lions can be a good thing, lions. They found a link between having a bit of a catch-up at the weekend and reducing risk of heart disease, which is great. But we also need to be careful about interpreting this, because a lot of people, and I've been observing this for almost 30 years, a lot of people cane themselves during the week. You know, they don't get enough sleep, 59% score, sorry, don't want to pick on you, but then they think they'll just catch up at the weekend. And while there is some value in that, and this study is indicating that in relation to heart disease, the fact is we do need to be consistent with our sleep to some degree. There's a balance to be struck, is what I'm saying. What I like about this is that it is busting through that myth of we really need to be getting 8 hours of sleep. Because there is some, they call it plasticity in our sleep. Sometimes we need more, and sometimes we can get by on less, and we need to listen and not be a slave to the rules necessarily, or what our devices are saying.
Do you need less sleep as you get older?
Again, it varies from one person. I'm finding that I need more, especially if I want to look good in the mornings and I want to be active and fit and well. So our sleep, the architecture of our sleep, it does change as we get older. We have less deep sleep, we might have less REM sleep, our sleep might be more fitful. But what it does mean, I believe, is that as we get older, if we want to feel well, if we want to age well, we need to make better choices. So we need to really prioritise that sleep as we get older, particularly as life stress can increase.
Yeah, what are your top tips for getting the best night's
Oh,
sleep?
I love that question. I could be here all day. Let me give you my step one of my methodology. I call this my 5 non-negotiables for cleaning up your sleep. The first one is related to nutrition. Eat a nutritious breakfast in the morning. Don't skip breakfast. Ideally, eat within 45 minutes or so of rising, particularly if you have any sleep problems, difficulty getting to sleep or staying asleep or waking during the night. So breakfast is important. Number 2, hydrate well. Keep your brain well hydrated so your physiology and your biochemistry functions optimally. Number 3, don't over-rely on caffeine. Ideally, no caffeine after 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Don't use caffeine as a substitute for food. Number 4, cultivate a healthier relationship with our devices. Don't be on them before you go to bed, first thing when you wake up in the morning. Don't be constantly checking them throughout the night. Number 5, and this one is slightly contra to this research piece, try to get to bed earlier. That pre-midnight sleep is really important. It sets you up for how you're going to sleep throughout the night. And emerging research, watch this space, shows that that pre-midnight sleep can really help to reduce risk of developing neurological disorders later on in life.
And what's your advice for us that have to keep toddlers hours during the week?
Oh, every trick in the book is needed. So make sure that you're doing all sorts of other things, your lifestyle. You know, you're eating well, you're moving enough, you're hydrating, you're getting enough natural daylight, you're managing your stress levels, you're patient, you're breathing with the toddler, you know, and the toddlers are playing up. So sleep is really important. There's an intelligence in the fact that we're designed to spend about 1/3 of our lives sleeping. Don't get overly fixated on it. You know, nature is clever. It compensates. You know, as a new parent, and I can relate to this from a little while back, if you're not sleeping so well because you've got a little baby, nature will intelligently give you the rest that you need, as long as you also honour all of the other aspects of your lifestyle.
It's good to see you. Thank you, Doctor.
Lovely
Thanks
to see
very
you
much
too.
Indeed. Thank you. 59%. Still to come on The Breakfast Show for you here on Sky News. Pay as you drive. The debates surrounding the idea behind a new tax to make up for more drivers switching to electric vehicles. Hello again, everybody. Welcome back to The Breakfast Show here on Sky News. Coming up, we'll be debating whether drivers should have to pay per mile to use the roads. You don't care because you don't drive.
No, I don't. So it doesn't bother me.
No. Moving on then.
Moving on to the top stories this morning, shall we? Pressure mounting on the Prime Minister as dozens of Labour MPs are reportedly refusing to support the government's proposal to means test the winter fuel allowance to pensioners. In a Commons vote tomorrow, the Treasury has contradicted a statement from Home Office Minister Diana Johnson that there could be more wiggle room to help pensioners, insisting tough decisions are needed to get a grip on public finances. Thousands of victims of antisocial behaviour say they're not being listened to by authorities. Sky News has had a first look at a landmark report into the scale of the problem. A joint investigation by Sky News and Lighthouse Reports has uncovered evidence of an ethnically motivated massacre in Sudan. And Great Ormond Street Hospital has apologised to families and launched an urgent review into more than 700 cases as the work of a former consultant at the hospital is being investigated.
The first Trades Union Congress conference under a Labour government for 15 years is underway in Brighton. The TUC General Secretary Paul Novak added his voice this morning to those calling on the government to U-turn over plans to cut winter fuel payments to millions of pensioners.
I don't want any pensioner going into the winter worried about putting the heating on. And so, we'll debate it during our Congress this week. I hope that the Chancellor will set out in the budget what she's going to do to make sure those pensioners, not just those on pension and tax credit, but those who aren't well off by any means, do go into the winter confident that they can heat their homes and stay safe and comfortable.
Our chief political correspondent, John Craig, is at the TUC conference in Brighton this morning. It's turning into a proper hot potato, this one, isn't it?
It's a big row, yes, one of many here. It's all the W's, really, are the big issues here at the TUC. Wages, winter fuel allowance, workers' rights, and, what will be debated later today here, calls for a wealth tax. Sharon Graham of Unite will be proposing a motion on that. Tax millionaires should be saying an extra 1% on their tax. Now, on winter fuel allowance, something of a muddle for the government this morning, because earlier today on Sky News, as you'll know, Diana Johnson, who, to be fair, is a Home Office minister, not a Treasury minister, said that she talked about the government being committed to the triple lock. Well, yes, we know that. The PM said that. Then she said all the options are being looked at by the government as to how to make sure the poorest and most vulnerable do not suffer. Well, that's not quite right, according to a Treasury source who's told our political editor, Beth Rigby, that this is not under consideration. The government stands firm. We have to take tough decisions to get a grip on the public finances. Now, at the weekend, the Prime Minister said there would be safeguards. Now, what he said was that pension credit, housing benefit and so on, he also claimed that the state pension would go up by more than the cuts in winter fuel allowance. So that is a claim the Prime Minister's been making. Last week there were suggestions the basic payment may go up by as much as £400. Well, that sounds a lot. So the government's got itself into a muddle. As we know, Rachel Reeves is talking to the Parliamentary Labour Party tonight. The PM comes here tomorrow. But the winter fuel allowance really has, I wouldn't say set this conference alight, but it's certainly boiling up to a pretty high temperature. Now, on how to offset these winter fuel allowance cuts if they go ahead, Mr. Novak, when I spoke to him yesterday, I interviewed him down on the beach. He favours a rising capital gains tax. That is something that Tories claim the Chancellor's going to do in the budget on the 30th of October. He argues that why should people who earn their income from shares or renting property or so on pay tax at a lower rate than those who are on PAYE or whatever. Sharon Graham this afternoon, the leader of Unite, going to be calling for a wealth tax. I just had a bracing walk along the seafront with Mick Lynch, the leader of the RMT. He backs that. He says the government's got to do something really radical. So expect to hear a lot more of this today. The General Secretary speaks here around about 11 o'clock. One of his team just told me it's going to be punchy. So boxing gloves on.
OK, for now, thank you. Who wants to see a picture of Idris Elba? OK, here we go. He's in Downing Street as you can see, is talking about knife crime. There's a new coalition to tackle knife crime launched by the government. We were speaking to the minister about it a little bit earlier on. Ninja swords are set to be banned in that crackdown on knife crime. The weapons left out of laws prohibiting the sale of machetes and zombie knives under the previous government. They will now be banned. The Prime Minister has pledged to work closely with the group and bring in some new laws to halve knife crime in the next decade. Where are you on paying per mile when you're driving? Should we talk about it in more detail? Let's get more information on that. And well, I don't know how, I've got a view on this, so I'm going to have to be quite cautious about making the case. You start.
Now, we've known for some time that some kind of pay-as-you-drive scheme is necessary to kind of cut congestion, clean up our air, and importantly, fund a transport system fit for the future. This is about making our, modernising our tax system, making it fairer for everyone, including for those who drive. And rather than just paying a flat tax, when you're crossing the line into a clean air zone, this is about thinking about, right, only paying for what you drive and having discounts for those who most need their car or those who are driving smaller, cleaner cars.
Howard?
Well, you just heard how complicated it already sounds already. It sounds all cuddly and wonderful, and every single driver wants to, be driving in clean air and their children to be, healthy in a good environment. But pay per mile is totally and utterly unfair. It cannot work well. And for the years and years and years, drivers have actually said they don't want it. Fairfield UK supporters, something like 80% don't want it. And recent polls, something like 58%, generally, but I think YouGov did it, said they don't want it either. The point is, how do you do it? Because do you have something like a chip in the car? Do you use cameras? All those sorts of things. There's a lot of problems with the things like the Big Brother issues. But most importantly, we already have a pay per mile. It's called fuel duty.
Well, I just want to come back on this point about it being fair or not being fair. The cost of driving has gotten cheaper and cheaper over years, whilst the cost of rail and public transport has just increased year on year.
That's a different argument.
But what I'm saying is, at the moment, we've got lots of wealthy people buying electric vehicles who are kind of getting a tax break because they pay no vehicle excise duty, they pay no fuel duty. There's a huge gap in our treasury at the moment. How are we going to plug it? I think pay per mile is the fairest, easiest way. And I don't just mean, charge people for how far they drive. Obviously, if you live in a rural area or if you rely on your car, such as care workers, you should be given a discount. That's the fairest way of going about this.
Howard was saying, how will you actually do it?
I mean, realistically, I think the technology is already there. Google, Meta, Tesla, Apple, they know where you are every second of every day. And people are very happy to give up that data. But also, people already have black boxes fitted in their car to get cheaper car insurance. So I don't actually think the technological argument is a valid one. The technology is there. It's about the political will to implement it. And we've known this for decades. The Labour government, Tory government, Tory Lib Dem government, this new Labour government, they've known it's had to happen. They've been too frightened to put it in place.
For 15 years, I've been fighting the campaign Fairfield UK, and we've managed to freeze fuel duty in that time. We're still one of the highest taxed drivers in the world, particularly diesel drivers. And so how are we going to tax, as I say, 44-tonne vehicles? Because everything will be passed on to the consumer. If you drive more than 5,000 or 6,000, the Resolution Foundation, I think, is when you start paying more and more than you should do. I drive a car that is worth more than £40,000 or £50,000, and I have to pay £500 tax. I'm told it's going to go up to £900 next year. There's going to be a flat rate of 180, I think, for everyone else. So even if you drive a cheap car, and that's including EVs will be hit next year as well. The point is, what we need to do is have a long-term road user strategy to replace the 50 billion or 35 billion, which is the fuel duty plus VAT, that they're going to lose definitely by forcing us into an unnecessary, needless 2030 ban.
But I think long-term strategy is what we're thinking about.
I agree with that.
So when we're talking about the climate change, we're talking about the climate crisis, that is long-term. And when we come to these discussions, constantly what we're saying is, oh, but people don't have alternatives. This is about funding the alternatives. It's fine, if you're using the road, pay to use the road, pay a little bit to use the road.
But
and
don't we pay that with fuels duty?
But a lot of EVs now don't. That's the problem
no, but next
here.
year
There's
they
a
are going to
huge
start
gap.
paying it. And the point is, what we're saying about this, and I repeat what I said at the beginning, everyone wants clean air. Even people who drive a dirty diesel, but they can't afford to buy an EV. These are the situations. The incentives have gone. Even the London, the scrappage scheme's been dropped now. All those sorts of things are happening. The motorist is facing anti-driver taxes more and more. And guess what? In the budget coming up, we're going to see a 10p rise in fuel duty. All it is about cash grabbing and hitting motorists hard.
Howard, you know me. I'm not anti-driver at all.
No, I know.
This is about the right tool for the job, right? What is the right tool for the job? And we know for the climate, for our health, we need to get people driving less. So to fund the public transport system for the future and to have efficient EVs on the road and for it to be easier for disabled people, for care workers, for cabbies, we need to reduce congestion. And the way to do it is through this fairer scheme.
Well, we need to stop actually making congestion problems up. Like, we've got cycle lanes the size of HGV vehicles, we've got 20-mile-an-hour limits, we've got speed bumps, pinch points. It's been that London, particularly, and don't forget this goes out to other cities across the country as well, are following a sort of pattern which is actually hitting motorists hard. No one asks the motorists what they want. We all want the same thing.
But that's a conscious decision by the mayor. That's what he wants to do.
Exactly. And from my point of view at the moment in time, I'm going to be fighting for the motorists for them to actually reduce this congestion and reduce their cost of driving. I also want clean air as well, so don't think we're fighting in one way.
But I would say it's not cycle lanes that are causing congestion, it's the fact
it is.
that...
On Park Lane it is.
I don't think... I think for the most part it is the traffic that causes
There's
congestion.
already a cycle lane, for example, which Kay just said, already in Hyde Park. We put another one and then tell us to drive on a dual carriageway at 20 mile an hour. Sorry?
London is a city of 10 million people.
Yeah, and growing.
It's impossible to have for all 10 million people to have a car. It is the most efficient way for people to get around by walking, wheeling, cycling, using public transport. And that's what we need to do, is invest in our cities.
Why don't you promote public transport being free? Why don't we do that?
I would like to see public... Well, who's going to fund it, Howard? I would say a pay-per-mile scheme.
Well, exactly. As usual, you go straight for the motorist.
Fascinating stuff, guys. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Thank you. I bet you've got a view on that, haven't you? Everybody has. Everybody in the office this morning was talking about they were either on one side or the other, depending on whether they had a car or not. Still to come on The Breakfast Show for you here on Sky News. The COVID-19 inquiry hears personal stories of strain on healthcare during the pandemic.
I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
Wall Street! Wall Street!
Well, the plan seems to be to head to the police station where the policeman who fired the shots was based.
And everything his memories is all gone.
In almost every corner, this town has been completely destroyed by the fire. I've witnessed the remarkable passion for politics here, but the anger too.
We have to get Trump out of the White House.
Is this the moment to reform gun laws?
It's easy to go to politics.
But it's important. It's at the heart of the issue.
I get that that's where the media likes to go.
No, it's not. It's where many of the people we've talked to here like to go.
I report on the biggest stories from around the world. This is a town that is effectively encircled by the Russians. You say it's all fabrication, what's happening in Bucha?
Destroyed my nation.
We take you to the heart of stories that shape our planet. Yeah, I can hear now quite a few explosions in the distance here in Jerusalem. A very violent series of confrontations here. What do you think of ISIS?
Everybody here knows the truth of ISIS.
Bring it on.
With America divided and tensions running high, get ready for an election like no other.
Join our teams as we follow the campaign trail as America decides.
We will win, win, win. Get closer to the action this US election with full reaction and analysis.
Sky News, the full story first.
Emirates premium economy. Maybe one day all airlines will have seats like this. Fly Emirates, fly better.
Hello again, everybody. Welcome back to The Breakfast Show here on Sky News Monday morning. Great Ormond Street Hospital is urgently reviewing more than 700 cases involving children who were all seen by one of its former orthopaedic surgeons. Some are said to have suffered life-changing injuries as a result of unnecessary or inappropriate procedures. Let's get more with Daniel, who's outside the hospital for us this morning. Hi, Daniel, tell us more.
Hi, Kay. Well, as you say, this review is very, very serious indeed. It looks at the work of a former doctor here called Dr. Yassir Jabbar, who served at Great Ormond Street between 2017 and 2023. The review is claiming that some of the work that he carried out on the children that he operated here was not good enough, ultimately suggesting that the work that he did was inappropriate, unnecessary, causing serious harm, in the words of some of the lawyers who represent the parents and families of the children who would have been operated on here. So far, the review has identified 22 children that they believe have come to harm as a result of operations that he carried out here. And Great Ormond Street hospitals say that they have contacted all parents and families who have been impacted, and where harm has been identified, they say that they've discussed those cases with those families under their duty of candour, and that they wish to convey their sincere apologies to those families. But Dr. Yassir Jabbar, we understand that he now operates. He now works in Dubai, doesn't work in the UK anymore, and Great Ormond Street Hospital, well, they asked for this review in conjunction with the Royal College of Surgeons, and that came out of complaints and concerns that were raised by families who were seeing the impact that these operations were having on their children. But this review is expected to last around 18 months. They've got more than 700 cases to go through, so you can understand why it's going to take that long. But as I say, looking at the best part of 2 years before we're going to get any answers on this, but the impact that his work may have had on these children, well, that could last a lifetime, Kay.
OK, for now, thank you. The impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on NHS workers and patients will be examined today as the public inquiry enters a new phase. Let's get more, should we? Ashish is standing by for us at the inquiry. What's the plan, Ashish? Good morning.
Good morning, Kay. The plan is that the doors will open at approximately 10:30 when proceedings will be underway for this module 3. And as you were just explaining, this is the module that looks at the impact of the pandemic on the country's healthcare system. And when it does that, it will examine what impact it had on the staff who worked in the NHS, who were trying to treat all those patients, and also what they've described as the patient experience. They'll also be looking at the core decision-making and leadership within the healthcare systems during the pandemic, the staffing levels and the critical care capacity. You'll remember we talked a lot at the time about just how many patients could be seen and the difficult decisions that healthcare leaders had to make about which patients would be treated, which patients wouldn't be treated. The do not resuscitate orders that were given to clinicians and patients' families at the time. So some very challenging and difficult decisions being made at the time. And what this module hopes to do is examine the leadership and why those systems were put in place and whether they were effective. Of course, what we've had this morning are the people, the core participants whose council will be giving their submissions on today, the opening day, before evidence is heard later this week. We're told at the beginning of today's session there will be an impact film, recordings made by those bereaved through the pandemic. It's expected to be very powerful, a poignant reminder of what so many people had to go through during the pandemic and why this inquiry is so important, to make sure that lessons are learned and put in place. So if we were to face another pandemic in the future, which is quite likely, that we wouldn't make the same mistakes as the mistakes made during the last one.
How long is the inquiry likely to last in total, Ashish?
A number of years. There are about 8 or 9 modules that could be lengthened, but it's expected to go on for at least another couple of years. But this module, Module 3, will go on through the autumn until the end of November. There'll be a short break in between, and there will be a review at the end of this process, a report produced, as there have been for the other 2 modules we've already heard. So this will last until the end of November, a short interim report published, but the COVID inquiry will go on for a number of years, Kate.
OK, for now, thank you. Quick look at the weather for you now, here on Sky News, Monday morning. Here we go. It's drier for most, but turning colder and windier tomorrow. Widespread blustery showers and some longer spells of rain. Northern and western parts fairly clear and chilly, with early fog beginning to lift, while northern, central and eastern England are mild, but cloudy with a little patchy rain. Making headlines again on the programme this morning, the Minister speaking to us, misspeaking, said the Treasury. This is what she said this morning, the Policing Minister, Home Office Minister, when we asked her what would happen about 10 million pensioners no longer getting credit for winter fuel payments.
I think it's a really tough decision. Nobody wants to make this.
But you think it's the right thing to do?
I think in government, one of the things you have to do is make tough decisions. And unfortunately, this is one of the first ones that we're having to deal with. But we know that we are also committed to the triple lock on pensions, and we've got the budget coming up in October. So I think all the options are being looked at by government as to how to make sure the poorest and most vulnerable do not suffer.
Whoa, says the Treasury. Hold on a cotton-picking minute.
Yes, all the options, not so much the case. Certainly not this with regards to winter fuel allowance. Although it's been pointed out, hasn't it, that there are about 800,000 pensioners who will be eligible for the pension credit, which would then enable them to get winter fuel allowance. There's people being urged to examine their circumstances, but misspeak there on behalf of the police, the Policing Minister.
Yes, straight on the phone, the Treasury saying, no, that's not what's going to happen. But we'll see. There is a vote in Parliament tomorrow.
Tomorrow, yes.
Yeah. Meantime, the Prime Minister's got a very busy week this week, and this morning he had a breakfast meeting with Idris Elba. It was about knife crime, zombie knives. There they are, in Downing Street.
Yes, so we heard actually from Diana Johnson talking about the bans that are going to come into place with regards to zombie knives, samurai knives. We've seen so many loopholes that have enabled people to buy blades that are 12 inches longer, if not longer, serrated, just horrific implements that have no purposeful use other than to cause terror on the streets, as so many families and communities have experienced.
So they're going to be outlawed. And then tomorrow he's going to meet up with Secretary of State Blinken, who is in town, and then he's got this vote on pensions in the evening, I think. Obviously, he's got a stonking majority, so it will go through, but there is some suggestion that there's a lot of Labour MPs who, potentially up to 50, who will find something else that they need to do tomorrow evening.
Very busy with constituency-based issues, maybe, or whatever. So I think after that two-child benefit cap, the 7 MPs, most of them on the far left of the party, people like John McDonnell, allied to former Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn, allied to Corbyn, they all got the whip removed for 6 months. So obviously lots of MPs don't want to maybe cause the issue, but want to have their feelings known at the same time.
So he's got that. And then towards the end of the week, he is going to Washington to meet up with President Biden again, second time since he became Prime Minister just a couple of months ago. But interestingly, Kamala Harris will also be in the room.
Very keen, I guess, isn't it, for the Democratic Party to try and get those ministerial, prime ministerial type looking moments, presidential moments, like getting her in the room face to face. Obviously, we know that the The Labour Party said they would work with Trump, but they'd very much rather work with Kamala Harris, surely.
Well, I'm sure they'll say whoever is in power, we don't interfere. I can hear him now.
Choice of
we
the
don't
people.
interfere with international politics. We are happy to work with whoever is in charge of the government at the time. But they're just going to make sure they see Kamala Harris beforehand to be on the safe side. We'll see you tomorrow.